This episode of the Pewtercast was recorded on Monday night, March 6, 2017. As we record this, it is the eve of the legal tampering period for free agents in the NFL. So by the time you listen to this, some of the content may be out of date, which basically means you just get to know right away if we were right or wrong in any part of our conversation. So make sure you're keeping up with the latest and reliable Bucs news. Follow our friends at Buccaneers.com, PewterReport.com, or thepewterplank.com.
Don't forget about Real Bucs Talk on Twitter.
Oh yeah, I guess you can follow them too. Welcome to the Pewtercast. I am Brent Allen, your host.
And Ren Daxt, your co-host.
Today is March 6, 2017, and this is episode 30. Let the Tampa'ing begin. Hey, Ren, do you know why I picked that title, Let the Tampa'ing begin?
Because it's supposed to sound like tampering.
Listen, here's the thing. You're right. Every comedian has jokes that they love, but they just know that they're not that good. And this is one of those jokes for me. As you're right. You know, we said kind of at the top of the show, as we record this, the legal tampering period is just about to begin. But obviously we're here in Tampa, so let the Tampa'ing begin. Let's bring the free agents to Tampa. Get it? You see what I did there? Rim shot.
Thank you.
All right, Ren. Hey, Ren. Hey, welcome back to the show, brother. How was your week?
My week's been good. Thank you so much. Really excited. I heard our numbers were great, and some people were nice enough to say some nice things about me. They like the new addition to the show. It's going to be a great off season. Pretty much starts tomorrow morning, right at noon. It's going to be a good time. But remember last time I told you about how I was getting a bed in, the king size mattress?
Yeah, they didn't try sticking it through that slot in your door, did they?
No, they did not try to stick it through the mail slot. Actually, we don't have it yet. So
oh no,
that's yeah. So we have a nice air mattress I've been sleeping on for close to a week, but they promise it'll be here Friday. So that's what's going on here. Happy wife, happy life.
That there is not much truer than that, but a big part of happy wife is having a freaking bed, So
I've explained that extensively.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, you kind of talk about sleeping on the floor. I kind of had a good week, and I'll get to that here in just a sec. I mentioned on Twitter earlier today that we have some good news to share with everyone. Well, this isn't the good news, but this is good news as well. Turns out this summer, my family and I are going to be loading up the wagon, and we are moving, wait for it, back to Florida. And, we know where we're going. We know when we're going. Now we just have to make it happen. But this last weekend, we were actually in Florida doing a little house hunting trip, and we found a house. And so we were able to make an offer. We got all the paperwork signed. We've got still some more stuff to do coming up, but we got all the initial stuff done. So my family we're coming back to Florida, and we have been sleeping on the floor over the course of the weekend as well. We had all the kids and everybody, and they kind of took over the bed, and old dad got to move to the floor and let everybody else have the bed. So, yeah, well, that was, huh? That's
really cool news. I mean, now you're down here in Florida, you can try to make some Buc games.
Oh, absolutely.
What I don't understand is if that's not the good news, like what could possibly top that?
Well, I'm so glad you said this. You actually referenced it just a second ago, where you said that our numbers were really, really good. Well, I am happy to announce. I'm happy to say this. This just tickles me to death. As of this morning, the last episode, Ren, that we did, episode number 29. I think I told you early last week, maybe earlier this week, that it had officially became the most downloaded episode in the history of the Pewtercast, which is pretty cool.
You did.
Very, very cool. Well, as of this morning, not only is it the most downloaded episode in the history of the Pewtercast, the next most downloaded episode is an episode called bucked by the Broncos. It was, obviously following the Broncos game from this last season. As of this morning, we have officially doubled those numbers. So it is the most downloaded episode times 2 in the history of the Pewtercast. So very fun. Thanks to all the fans. Thanks to everybody who's jumped on board. I mean, I can't believe that this is an off-season show. Normally this is when the numbers go down. Everybody kind of goes out. You expect numbers to be really, really high during the season and to kind of come down during the off-season. But, man, last week literally blew every other episode from last year out of the water. So, I don't know. I guess announcing Daxt as a co-host only means good things for a podcast. Yeah,
they must really like that new guy. But
yeah.
Seriously, thanks a lot, everyone. It just kind of shows that it's sort of a trickle effect, People are really starting to follow the Bucs, and the thirst for Buck knowledge is almost endless. And they're coming out and they're finding us and they're liking what we're doing, and yeah, it's great. Like, thank you so much to everyone that downloaded and listened and even comments and talking about us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a whole lot of fun. And Ren, not only that, but something happened this last week that has not happened on this show for quite some time, and that's we got an email from a fan, which was really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of pull this out of the early days of the Pewtercast. Let's read an email that we got this last week. This one is from Panama, like the country, Panama.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really cool. It says, "Hello, Brent. I am a huge fan of the podcast. I've listened to all of your episodes since the instant cast right after the Chicago Bears game. I can't review your podcast on iTunes because my account is geographically blocked in Panama. So instead, I'm writing to you to let you know that you have an international fan. Keep it up this offseason and go Bucs. Saludos from Javier Suarez." Javier, thank you so much for sending in an email, man. That is so freaking cool. And man,
right?
I really appreciate that. Man, that's awesome. I know we had a couple fans over in like Scotland and a couple other places, but you are, I think, officially the first one that I'm aware of anyway that has come from like Central America.
Yeah, I mean that is cool, and like I'd like to encourage like more fans, but yeah, if you're over in Scotland or somewhere else out of the United States or even out of Florida, send us an email. Let us know where you're listening from. I mean, we're like an international broadcast. We're like a big airport now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Now listen, I don't know what we have to do. I don't know what phone number we have to call to get iTunes or whatever unblocked in Panama, but let's figure that out, so because we want Javier to be able to come in and leave an iTunes review. That just helps other people find us and helps this community keep growing, which that, by the way, provides a nice little segue into reminding people about something that we announced on the last episode, which is we are in the middle of our first giveaway as a show. And all you have to do is just go to iTunes, leave us a review, email us a screenshot of it before you hit submit. You email it to us, thepewtercast@gmail.com, and that will enter you into a giveaway. And the giveaway is an autographed picture of Kevin Pamphile. So that's pretty good. And you know what, Javier? Your name is automatically, just because you did that and you emailed us that, you're automatically entered into winning for this giveaway as well. So make sure you guys do that over at iTunes. If you already subscribed to the show, no problem. Just search for the Pewtercast like you've never been subscribed before, and it'll pop up over there. That's where you can do that. All right, well, enough of all that kind of stuff. Let's get into the show. What do you think, Ren?
I'm ready.
All right, well, on today's episode, Ren and I are going to be taking a look at the free agent market the Bucs are facing. On the last episode, we focused on all of our own free agents, but now we're going to be taking a look around the league to see who's out there that we Bucs fans really should be keeping an eye on. And then for our top three today, we're going to stay in the theme of our free agents, and we're going to be taking a look backwards at the top three Bucs free agent signings that we've had kind of in the history of the Buccaneers. And then we're going to round out the show with a segment called Buck in the News. It's all coming your way right here on the Pewtercast.
I wanna be a billionaire, Breaking Bad, buy all of the things I never had. I wanna be on the cover of Forbes magazine, smiling next to Oprah and the Queen.
Yeah, I would have a show like Oprah. I would be the host of Everyday Christmas. Give Travi a wish list. I'd probably pull a Angelina and Brad Pitt and adopt a bunch of babies that ain't never had shit. Give away a few Mercedes like, here lady, have this. And last but not least, grant somebody their last wish. It's been a couple months that I've been single, so you can call me Travi Claus minus the ho-ho. Get it? I'll probably visit where Katrina hit, and damn sure do a lot more than FEMA did. Yeah, can't forget about me, stupid. Everywhere I go, I'ma have my own theme music.
Every time I close my eyes,
What you see, bro?
I see my name in shining lights. Oh, yeah,
And what else?
a different city every night. I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
You're listening to episode 30, Let the Tampa'ing Begin. Now, Ren, before we dive into all of this, some people may be wondering why we aren't talking about the Combine in this episode. Because, I mean, after all, the Combine just wrapped up, today, I think it was. It's fresh in everybody's memory. You were doing some live tweeting throughout the weekend. There's a lot of buzz around the Combine right now. Well, we're not actually talking about the Combine right now because ultimately the Combine is going to be more concerned with the draft than with free agency. And free agency is here. It's on our doorstep. The new league year starts at 4 o'clock on Thursday. Players can execute their contracts then with new teams. At noon tomorrow is when, the legal tampering period could have begun. We all know that the illegal tampering period began, several days ago. Really, this is when the 2017 Buccaneers begins to take shape. So we're going to kind of push pause on the Combine. We'll address that actually in the next episode of the Pewtercast. But, I know, Ren, you got to be dying to talk about at least something from the Combine. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. I've got the countdown clock on my phone. You've got 60 seconds. Get it out of your system. Anything you want to say about the Combine, and go.
Well, thanks. I don't want to give anything away about players that I liked or didn't like, but this draft class is deep, and they're deep everywhere where the Bucs need help. Safety, deepest class. Tight end, deepest class. Running back, deep class. Cornerback, deep class. Wide receiver, deep class. And that was kind of the general consensus before the Combine happened, and the guys showed up and they proved it. Records were broken on almost every event or drill, if you want to call them. So it was fun to watch. The athletes that are coming in, it's like the new generation of defensive players that are here to battle the generation that happened 5 years ago of all the tall, big, fast wide receivers. And you're going to be able to get second-round talent in the fourth round. Every team's going to be able to get second-round talent in the fourth round. So I can't wait for next podcast. It's going to be good.
Yeah, it should be fun. We've got a very special guest lined up for that episode, and we'll be talking more about that person when that episode comes around. So, but for now, let's go ahead and get to talking about free agents from around the league. Last episode, we talked about our very own free agents in-house. Now we're going to be talking about kind of the rest of them. We're going to expand out. Now, according to Sport Track, there are 453 free agents in the NFL this year.
That's it?
That's a lot. Yeah, that's it, but that's it. I don't know. That's just what they say. Now, I don't know how accurate that number is, but regardless of that, there is going to be a lot of free agents that are about to hit this market, and we cannot possibly go through every single one of them on this show. So instead, Ren, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go by position groups and see who are the top candidates that kind of bubble out of the league at each one of those position groups, and we'll talk about which ones the Bucs may be interested in or not really interested in. Ones that fans should keep an eye on. We're not going to try to project, the Bucs are definitely going to get that guy. There's been a great meme that's been going around the Facebook groups for Buccaneers that I love it. It's you might have seen, it's like a picture of a guy pulling his eyes out of his face saying, another team just released a player. It's time to go sign him right now. And it's so accurate.
Yeah, every time someone gets released, it's it hits Twitter and hits Facebook. Like, do you think we should sign this guy? It was Jamar Charles, and the first it started with Victor Cruz, and every guy there's just one day conversation. But yeah, that all ends tomorrow. So
right. So instead of predicting who we think the Bucs should take, or to say they have to go get this guy, no, we're not going to do it. We're just going to say who's out there, and is this a person that really us as fans need to maybe kind of have our eye on, should the Bucs want to make a move for it. Now that said, before we get into all that, I want to kind of address free agency as a whole in the context of where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and specifically our general manager, Jason Licht, is kind of as a team, because I think it might give us a little bit of insight into what we can expect from free agency this year. Now, we did mention on the last episode how Jason Licht has said that his focus this year is really going to be on retaining talent, meaning keeping the players that are scheduled to be free agents that are already on the team here with the team. And of course, there's going to be some that go. There's going to be a lot that stay. However, pewterreport.com had a fantastic write-up about this very subject in the latest SR's Fab 5. In fact, it was the number one on that particular Fab 5 from last week. Everyone go read it. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. But I want to pull some info from there. And here's something that Jason Licht said. I'm pulling a quote. It said, "We've done a much better job of bringing in the right type of guy," which I love that. I love that he says that. That they're not just going out looking for who's a really good player to fill a hole that we need, but they're looking for a type of a person, a type of a guy. Which we've been talking about a lot of what it is to change the culture of the Buccaneers. And one guy that I point to every time when I think of the right type of guy that's a free agent signing is a guy from last year, Robert Ayers. I loved that we got to hear Robert Ayers on the Bucs Total Access radio show last year, which, Ren, I don't know how much listening you did to that.
Second favorite show.
Yeah, it was great. Loved him. And the thing he kept saying was, he came from Denver Broncos, a Super Bowl team, saying, I'm here to help the Buccaneers get to the Super Bowl. He has yet to really identify himself as a Buccaneer. He kind of always talks about it in the third person a little bit, like, I'm here to help them get to the Super Bowl, like, not us. So I'd like to see that maybe change just a little bit, but he's here helping this team really shift. And Jason Licht goes on to talk about those guys. He says, last year it worked out where we signed Robert Ayers and then we drafted Noah Spence. They signed Brent Grimes, but they also drafted Vernon Hargreaves. So in a perfect world, he'd love to do that, to bring in a veteran free agent and then draft a counterpart. He said it doesn't always work out that way, but the bottom line is they want to get some guys, regardless of their age, that can help us at positions we need help at. So whether they're super young and they're draftees, or whether they're towards the twilight of their career, at the ripe old age of 31, those are guys that we're looking to bring in. Now, Ren, I don't know what this tells you, but what this tells me is that we could be looking to draft some older guys and then draft some of the same positions as well, which I think could be a real interesting thing, because I've certainly posited on here before. Let's sign a safety and maybe a wide receiver and maybe a defensive end, and during the draft, let's go after a new running back and a wide receiver and maybe another safety. Don't match them up so much.
Just trying to fill each position and then leaving it the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's what Jason Licht does. I mean, not only did he do it with Ayers and Spence and Hargreaves and Grimes, but he also did it with Sweezy and Beninock, and he did it with Darryl Smith and Devontae Bond. Like, he covered all his bases last year. And I think, and a lot of people do think that's the way he's probably going to be looking at this free agency and draft this year.
Yeah. So, so let's say, the big name that's attached to the Bucs right now as we record this is Deshaun Jackson coming in. Just because we sign him doesn't mean that we probably won't expect to see another wide receiver early in the draft, or at least somewhere in the draft as they come in. So that should be a lot of fun. Now, Scott Reynolds did a great job breaking down kind of the first 3 years of free agent signings by Light. And he really makes the case that, in Light's first year, where he was paired with Lovie Smith, and Lovie Smith he really had control of the 53, so to speak, right? Like Lovie Smith had the final say on everything and asserted his will over Jason Light.
You have to remember that Lovie Smith got Jason Light his job.
Sure.
So basically Lovie Smith hired Jason Light, like the Glazers hired Lovie Smith, and Lovie Smith hired his general manager. So for that first year, you owed that guy, and he gave you your job. So you kind of want to listen to what he had to say and get him what he wanted.
Right. And I'm not judging that what Light did was wrong, or even that Lovie Smith did was wrong. It's just to remember that Lovie Smith was in a lot more control of that first year than really even Jason Light was. And in that year we signed 8 free agents, a lot of them for really big money, and a lot of those players wound up going bust. Looking at some of them, that was the year that we had Josh McCown come in. We had Anthony Collins. We let Donald Penn go so that we could sign Anthony Collins. We brought in Michael Johnson. We brought in Altron Werner actually that year. That was Mike Jenkins's year. But we also got Evan Smith and Brandon Myers and Clint McDonald, who are some guys who did work out. So it wasn't a complete bust of a free agency thing. It still has some impact today. But there were some really boneheaded, especially the big money boneheaded moves that came out of that.
It's exactly what I was going to say. The reason, fans hate that free agency class so much is because all the big money ones, the ones that were the big splashes, none of them worked out. Now it's true that McDonald, Myers, and Evan Smith are still on the team, and they're playing a role, but they're those guys are definitely like the second tier help out type of guys that and they weren't the big money who were supposed to take us to the next level, and all those guys didn't work out. Right.
Exactly. And Clint McDonald, now, and Clint McDonald's one of those guys that he may not be a starter on the team. And maybe is. I don't know off the top of my head. But he was a guy, Scott Reynolds says that Light was attracted to McDonald's work ethic. And from his experience with a Super Bowl championship with Seattle, which again, you talk about bringing in the right kind of guy. You want these guys that come from winning programs to be able to carry that DNA into the deal, into the team. You look at his second year, we only had half those signings. We only had 4, and that was the year we brought in Bruce Carter. Of course, he was originally going to be he did. He got displaced. Thank you. That's the word. Because he was going to be the Mike linebacker that year, but Quan Alexander came in the 4th round and came out of nowhere and really took his job. Which I'm okay with. Of course, that was also the year we brought in Chris Conti. Again, that was a Lovie Smith signing, more or less. But Chris did manage to stick around. Henry Melton came in, and he's no longer with us. And Sterling Moore also came in, and he's also no longer with us as well. But that was a much
more conservative approach.
Very, very much so. And then last year we only had 6. But those 6, let's look at who we got. We got Brent Grimes, Robert Ayers, J.R. Sweezy, who, we didn't see him at all. Didn't see him in pads at all. But, I think it might have been you actually, Ren, last year that said, or in the last episode that said, having J.R. Sweezy back is kind of like getting a new draft pick. It's going to insert something that we've not seen yet. We also got Josh Robinson, who was a candidate for one of our special teams players of the year. Our punter Brian Unger came in, and then Daryl Smith. He also came in as well. And each one of those guys, and you got to imagine J.R. Sweezy would have had a lot more impact if he had not gotten injured. So it's hard to say that was a good or a bad signing. We're just not there yet. But that J.R. Sweezy one was the only one that was a big long-term contract, as well, as you pointed out to me just a few minutes ago. So, but anyway, what I think that shows is we're now going into the 4th year of Jason Light's free agency pickings. And I think what we can learn and what we can see if we kind of glean all of this is the people we're going to be looking are going to they're not just going to be the star player wherever they come from. They're going to have to fit within the culture and the vibe of what Jason Licht's trying to build here in Tampa. They actually have to have a certain personality, a certain type of work ethic. They have to bring something to the locker room. That's going to be a part of it. But also, don't expect to see a whole lot of free agent signings. I think is a word of warning, a word of caution, I guess, I would give Bucs fans here over this next week. Just don't expect to see a whole lot. Don't see this stable of 8 free agents that we saw. Keep it to maybe a handful. Just a handful of players is really what I think we're going to see. Ren, any thoughts on that?
No, I'm right there with you. As of now, the 2016 free agency edition, I mean, they're all great and they all did exactly what they're supposed to do, except for Sweezy, who's an incomplete. Hopefully he becomes the player they think he can this year. But yeah, there's not going to be go out and 8 people, grab 8 players. Excuse me. There might be some big names there. There's all kinds of reports, but with the big players, you're going to get into a bidding war with some of them. So even if you want them and offer them a big deal, they still might end up going somewhere else. So I'm with you. I'm looking at about 5. I think that's going to be kind of the over under, and I think it's going to be a nice mixture like it was last year, like guys that were supposed to make a splash like Grimes, Ayers, and Sweezy, and guys that were real needs, such as a cornerback depth with Robinson and a punter with Brian Unger. Now, Brian Unger, he turned out to be a world beater, and it ended up being such a great pick. But at the time, people didn't know much about him and know actually how good he was. So yeah, it's like I said, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be good. So yeah, I'm gonna stick my over under at 5 this year.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. So, with that said, like I say, just I'm not expecting a lot in terms of quantity coming from these guys, but I do expect a lot in terms of quality because we even talked about that Brian Unger situation. I think he came in as a 1-year deal, and we signed him to a new deal. Right at the end of the year, or maybe a little bit before the end of the year last year.
Yeah, about 3/4 of the way through. I believe it was a 5-year deal too.
Yeah. I mean, but he was a guy who came in and earned it. Absolutely earned it. And that's what we'd love to see, come out of this again. For that, and I'm personally, this should be no surprise to the faithful listeners here at the Pewtercast. I am personally most interested to see the type of player that Jason Licht is going after, to see where they come from. What are the winning programs that these guys come out of, that they're bringing the culture and the DNA here to Tampa as we're really seeking to right the ship, to course correct, so to speak. And it takes a long time. It takes several years of shifting those kinds of things. So, and again, like I say, I can think of no better example than Robert Ayers from this last year, of a guy who has the mindset and the culture that he is really trying to help foster on this team. Now, with that said, Ren, let's go ahead and take a look at these free agents. Now,
let's go.
For this segment, I am actually going to be referencing a different article by Bleacher Report. I will also put that link in the show notes as well. And this article, just so you guys know, was dated in January of 2017, but it's breaking down the top free agents of this year, really by position group. So I'm going to just use this sort of as a reference, like as a guide for this conversation, simply because of the sheer number of free agents out there. So the first position that we have really to look at, we'll just start at the top of this article, is really talking about the quarterbacks, the quarterbacks that are coming open as free agents this year. Now, obviously, we're not looking for a new number 1 quarterback. We're just fine with Jameis Winston. All the stuff surrounded, it actually has Mike Glennon listed as one of the top free agent quarterbacks in the league. And, we all know that as of right now, the rumor is that the Bucs offered him $7 or $8 million a year to stay as a backup. He denied that. And he's going to test his value on the open market. And they're saying that he could bring in about $14, $15 million a year. He's been linked to places like the Chicago Bears, to the Jets, and a couple other places. So we'll see what happens really with that. But out of that group, Kirk Cousins has been listed as a free agent. Brian Hoyer, Mike Glennon, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Case Keenum. and along with a few others. I guess what we're looking for is a backup. What are your thoughts about the free agent class coming out of quarterback as that relates to the Buccaneers?
I don't think we're going to be a player at all. We've mentioned this. Well, I've mentioned this before in other podcasts. They kept Ryan Griffin around for a reason. They run with a 52-man roster the past 2 years because they didn't want to leave him unprotected on the practice squad. He's done 2 years in Dirk Cutter's offense, and I think he's going to give every opportunity to take the backup job. Now, having said that, if you make me pick somebody, like maybe they go through training camp and they're like, look, Ryan Griffin's just not there yet. Maybe they want to, hang on to him for one more year, or maybe they just release him like it was a 2-year experiment. It didn't work. You'd have to find a guy that played in a style of offense that Dirk Cutter runs, because these guys are coming in cold. And after looking at this list of like 32 quarterbacks, the best one I can come up with, and like you said, I'm skipping the Brian Hoyers, the Colin Kaepernick's going to cost too money. Ryan Fitzpatrick's out there. I came up with Matt Barkley. Been playing for the Chicago Bears, but at USC, they're a deep ball team, deep route team, over the top speed, beat you deep team. And I think that if anybody out of this class and Ryan Griffin doesn't work out, that would be some type of player that I think the Bucs would be looking for. Somebody that in college or has got some experience in the pros that ran that deep route type of offense.
Yeah, there's that one. The other thought that I was having is maybe they could look at somebody who is at kind of the tail end of their career. Maybe they were starters, but now they really are more in the backup spot. And I'm thinking specifically of like a Matt Castle. And I know this doesn't really fit, but even like an EJ Manuel out of the Buffalo Bills, Mark Sanchez, somebody who's just been around for a long time that kind of have that veteran presence. But they're just going to be coming in as a backup. They're certainly not coming in to displace Jameis. But that could be the only thing that I could see us really going for. But like you, I just don't think. I don't think that any one of these guys is going to come in for the money that we would really be willing to pay a backup quarterback, unless, as you say, Ryan Griffin they determine he's really not there yet. But they've hung on to him for a couple years because they really, really like him, and he's been around for a while. He's got familiarity with the system. So I think it's probably going to be a little hard to displace a guy like Ryan Griffin.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. If you need, say Ryan Griffin doesn't work out, and you need, you're only looking for somebody if Jameis gets hurt for 1 or 2 games, somebody like a Mark Sanchez, somebody who started and got years in the league, that's out there that at least understands the game of football enough that he's not going to be a liability. You might have to, run the ball a lot more, but he's not going to lose the game for you with dumb decisions with the football.
Right, because I'll tell you what Ryan Griffin is not. At least I don't believe he is. Ryan Griffin is not the future replacement for Jameis Winston either.
Oh no!
This is not. It's not like a Patriot situation where you've got a guy like Tom Brady who he could play another 3, 4, 5 years presumably, but he too is getting up there in age. He's not going to be around forever. So, you got to imagine they're looking for who the next quarterback is for the Patriots. At least that's on the horizon of their minds. We are nowhere near that with Jameis at all. Like that's not even a thing. So, that's just not something we're looking to develop.
The replacement for Jameis is like 7 years old.
Right. Yeah,
seriously, if he doesn't get hurt, it's true. Like, it's like 15 years, and that's kind of like a minimum. As long as he stays healthy, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on to the free agent running back class. Now, as you mentioned that running back was a position that's pretty deep in the draft as well. And we kind of mentioned like, hey, maybe we could sign a free agent and draft people out of the same category. To see now some of the top people that Bleacher Report has listed as free agents at running back this year is Le'Veon Bell, which I believe hasn't he already been tagged as a franchise player this year?
Yes.
Or already re-signed, so he's really off the market. But LeGarrette Blount, former Buccaneer, Who would love to see him back in pewter and red coming out of the New England Patriots? Eddie Lacy with the Packers, Latavius Murray with the Raiders, and then Danny Woodhead over with the San Diego Chargers. I'm sorry, it's the LA Chargers now, isn't it? So what do you think? Any of these guys? Obviously, there's also Adrian Peterson as well, who we know has been, he looks like he's leaving the Vikings as well. Any thoughts on signing any of the running backs that are available out of the free agent market this year?
Yeah, before like last week with the release of Adrian Peterson from the Vikings and Jamal Charles from the Chiefs, this was like a really, really thin free agency running back class. Like the people that have had some type of production in the league are over 30. The guys that are younger, you haven't heard of, and they haven't got a lot of shots and don't have shots running the ball and don't have a lot of production. I don't think Peterson and Jamal Charles is the answer. Once again, like you just referenced, that it's a very deep running back draft. I do think they bring in a bridge player. Obviously, and people talk about it, and we have on other podcasts that Jacquizz Rodgers is that guy, and I still think he is, because he's spent 3+ years in Dirk Cutter's offense, 2 in Atlanta, and then 1 here. He can pick up the blitz. He's a very serviceable running back. The only other guy I think they'll be looking at, and I've seen like little hints of him here and there, is Latavius Murray. He's 27. He got 12 touchdowns last year, but the red flags are he didn't get 200 carries, and he averaged under 4 yards per carry. And if the Dallas Cowboys line didn't exist, the Oakland Raiders would be the best line in the NFL. So it looks like all his touchdowns were like from 5 yards in, and they didn't feed him the ball enough behind, like that great offensive line. So, yeah, Jamar Charles. There is an interesting guy, Mike Gillislee out of the Bills. He gets very few touches. When he does get it, he's very productive. So that might be a guy they could get a little, I don't want to say on the cheap, but not quite, obviously, Adrian Peterson or Jamal Charles money. If they don't think that the guy they're going to, like, maybe they're targeting a running back in the 5th round or later. So he's probably, they want to give him a year to develop. So yeah, that Mike Gillislee out of Buffalo might be a stopgap. But I think it's going to be Jacquizz Rodgers. He's just the fit, and I think he wants to be here.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think Jacquizz Rodgers is coming back, and I think he should. And I think they should offer him regardless of what else they do at the running back position. Yeah, I don't know. There's only one name that really jumps out to me, and I hadn't even thought about Latavius Murray, honestly. There's one name that jumps out to me, and this should be no surprise, because I don't think we're going after Adrian Peterson. He's going to want too much money, honestly. And I think Jamar Charles is also they're going to want too much money for what we're looking to invest in that position right now, especially given the fact we still have Doug Martin under contract.
Yes.
And while his guarantees may have been void, his contract has not been void. And if he does continue to play, that's what he's going to get, unless they go in and completely rework that contract, which is absolutely a possibility as well. But we still have that looming out there. The one that really piques my interest, and for reasons that we talked about just a few minutes ago, really is LeGarrette Blount. One, because I'd love to see him back in pewter and red. I hate the fact that we released him so many years ago. I feel like that was a mistake. I would have loved to see him. But here's a guy who has been playing under a winning culture for a lot of years now and has won how many Super Bowls with the New England Patriots over the last few years? 2? Is it just 2? Because I was thinking it was 3, but doesn't matter. Still, it's okay. Still, he's been in the Super Bowl. He has that DNA. He has that championship mindset to him, and that to me spells somebody that Jason Light might want to actually bring back to Tampa. Now, I don't know that LeGarrette Blount's going to want to come back to Tampa. I do remember that last year he was actually I don't think the Patriots signed him back last year because he was a free agent last year as well, right? And it was like for a month, like he was out in free agency looking for a job, and the Patriots wound up bringing him back on a 1-year deal, which is why he's now up again as a free agent. But I'd be real interested to see what they want to do with him. If there might be a little bit of wanting to bring him back, really, because he's a guy who's been in that winning system, to bring some of that mindset back to Tampa. That's the only reason, but I don't think that impacts whether or not we bring back Jacquizz Rodgers either way. I think we do bring him back. And there's, like I say, there's still that question mark going on of what do we do with Doug Martin, and as well, as you mentioned, the very deep running back class that we have here coming up in the draft. So it'll be interesting. The one I'm personally watching for is LeGarrette Blount. I think Latavius Murray, just because you said it, I'm going to be watching for that name here over the next couple of days. But I wouldn't be surprised to see if we do nothing at running back for this particular free agency outside of just sign our own guy back with Jacquizz Rodgers. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I like LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah.
I mean, he could be a good fit. Obviously he's been here before. He's got more, a little more make you miss than you give him credit for, given his size. And like you said, the intangibles as far as coming from a winning team are something that you're always thinking about, and I should probably start maybe a little more when looking at free agents. But so as far as like your criteria, he fits in there. It's not a bad idea.
It'd just be real interesting to see what they do. That's all I'm saying. And that's what this list is about. Who are the people to keep an eye on? Now, I'll tell you what would surprise me is if we did nothing with the running back, including not bringing back Jacquizz Rodgers. That would surprise me a little bit. Because I think we mentioned this last week. You're going to be able to get Jacquizz Rodgers at such a good price. I just don't see how we don't bring him back. But that's just my own thing. But moving on, wide receiver. We've already talked about this a little bit. The biggest name out of here that is connected with the Bucs already is Deshaun Jackson, but also some of the big names: Alshon Jeffrey, Terrell Pryor out of the Browns, Pierre Garçon out of the Redskins as well. Kenny Britt out of the Rams. Those are some of the big names coming out of there. Couple others, Ted Ginn Jr. out of the Panthers. Vincent Jackson is a Buccaneer. We talked about him briefly last week as well. Couple other names. Yeah. Any thoughts with wide receivers? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you can make this list like 20 players long. I mean, there's a lot of wide receivers out there. And you mentioned the top guys. I think Terrell Pryor is going to be an interesting look. I know he wants to stay in Cleveland, and Cleveland says they want him, but he's going to cost about $10 to $12 million a year. I think he's super athletic, and he's kind of got that prototype futuristic body for the wide receiver, the big tall guy that's fast as lightning and big strong hands. But even when we're recording this, we're watching, we're getting reports on Twitter that Deshaun Jackson's already in the state of Florida. It came out during the combine that he's going to come to One Buc Place and meet with the Buccaneers. So it looks like they've already decided out of all the big ones who they want and who they're pushing for. So if you see Deshaun Jackson, you read reports that he gets on a plane and leaves and doesn't have a contract and nothing's been reported, then that means they missed on him. Because once a guy, especially early in free agency, once a guy leaves, that means he's probably not going to sign. I would give like 85, 90% of the time. So, like I said, this list is super long. We can kind of like go here and there with it, but it looks like they got their guy, and they're going after Deshaun Jackson like hard.
Yeah, I might amend one little thing that you said. If he gets on a plane and he leaves, it also could mean that they passed on him. Not just that they missed, but they also could have passed on him, depending on what's going on there.
That's true. That's true.
Now let's go ahead and bring this back around. I know we talked about it last week, but Vincent Jackson. It has been reported and seems to have been reported a lot over the last couple of days, including just a couple of hours ago I saw it pop up again, where he is saying he does not want to retire. And that was kind of the question mark we talked about last week was, well, is he going to retire? Should he retire? We kind of thought he should. But he is saying, no, he's not retiring. He wants to play again, which is not surprising. You know, he's had a couple of injury-laden years these last couple of years, and nobody wants to go out on that. And he feels like he still has some gas left in the tank. What are your thoughts? Is he somebody that the Buccaneers bring back? You know, is he going to cost a lot of money? Would he come back to the Bucs and take a pay cut? What are your thoughts on Vincent Jackson returning to Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I wavered back and forth on this a lot, to be honest. At first, you know, at the beginning, or as soon as like Super Bowl ended and we start talking about free agency and the draft, things like that, the first thing thought in my head when Vincent Jackson was no, absolutely not. Like, you know, thank you very much. You were a very good free agency pickup, but you're injury prone. Who knows what you're going to cost? It's just time to move on. And then I thought, well, you know, he is such a great locker room guy. And he is such a great community guy. Would he take some money to be able to, you know, have a 6'5" frame down there in the red zone, almost be like like the Buccaneers that they tried to do a few years back with ASJ and Mike Evans and him? If he like, you know, got in like, you know, 5-10 plays a game, would he do that? And then you listen to Dirk Cutter and Jason's like press conferences at the Combine this week, and if you kind of read between the lines. I think they've had discussions with Vincent Jackson. He said he wants to play, and I think they said, well, that's your right, and thank you very much. And to us, because they both said this, he'll always be a Buccaneer, which basically means, like, that's it. As far as, you know, we love you. If you get in the Hall of Fame, you know, go in as a Buck.
Right. Wear our jersey.
Yeah, wear our jersey. He's obviously not going to get in the Hall of Fame. But, yeah, it just seems like they've both agreed to move on. Vincent wants to play again, and good for him, and I hope he does well. But
wait. Did you just say it's obvious he's not going to get in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think his numbers stack up.
Okay.
I mean, I really don't. I think he's a very good receiver, but if he could have added on to these past 2 years like he did the first few years he was a Buccaneer, and like he had an injury, one injured season in San Diego too, where I think he missed, I want to say all, but that might be exaggerating. He missed a big chunk of the season in San Diego. I mean, he's going to be a very good, possible Ring of Honor guy, but I just don't see him as a Hall of Famer. I really don't.
Okay, fair. That's fair enough. I honestly hadn't given it that much thought, but you just kind of off the handle said that. I couldn't just let that go by. So, so interesting. Now is not the time to have that conversation, but maybe we'll have that, coming up in the future. I think you actually do make a good point. And maybe that's part of why he wants to come back. He realizes he's not quite put up Hall of Fame numbers, and he feels like he has a shot to still be able to do that. Or at least maybe that's at least a part of his discussion. But, whatever it is, he still feels like he wants to play, and he wants to go test his worth and his value. I don't know if he's trying to test his worth and his value as much as he just wants to play. Which if he thinks he can do that without being injured, certainly wish him all the best. I'd hate to see him not in a Bucs uniform. It'd be a hell of a pay cut, I think, if he were to be able to return to Tampa. I mean, he would have to. It's almost like he would have to make Light an offer to keep him that Light couldn't refuse.
He has to get paid at least $1 million, which for him is probably, for his player, his caliber and characters on the cheap. But that's like he has to get at least $1 million because he's 10 years in the league, and that's veteran minimum at that time.
Right, but he's not making $7 million a year.
Yeah, I get you. I know where you're going with that. I just wanted to throw that out there as like the minimum. Like he can't go like, hey, I'll play for $250,000. Like he can't do that.
Right. Right. And, and let's just say this, Vincent Jackson certainly has made his mark with Mike Evans, and has left that veteran mindset in with Mike Evans. Cause you certainly can talk about how I'm sure Vincent was instrumental in Mike Evans maturing of this last year that we've talked about so much so far. But Deshaun Jackson certainly looks like he he is the closest as of right now, as of talking about this, to becoming a new wide receiver for the Bucs, and that doesn't negate us drafting a wide receiver as well. I don't know. It'd be real interesting to watch. I'm looking through the rest of the names here, and I don't see anybody who jumps out at me. Michael Floyd was a guy who kind of popped up last year. I wound up going to the Patriots. Cordell Patterson's a guy who's jumping in.
I like Cordell Patterson as a kick returner. I mean, put him in the slot and return kicks. He's an all-pro kick returner, and I saw that it's only be around just over right around $4 million a year to sign him. But I have a guy for you.
Okay.
What would you say? And I already know what you're going to say. But what would you say if Josh Gordon was reinstated?
Okay. I know what I'm going to say.
I think I know what you're
I'm curious. What do you think I'm going to say?
I think that
because I've already tweeted it. So if people want to go back and check me out, because I'll say the same thing I tweeted about a week ago, I guess, when this name first came up. Go ahead. What do you think I'm going to say?
I think you're going to say absolutely not. I think that you don't think you could trust him, and rightfully so. But I don't think he's the type of player that if you were the GM, you would want on your team.
Close. I said the same thing about him that we said about ASJ and about a few other people, that you have to ask the question, is it a character issue or is it a maturity issue? And he's a guy who I believe has come out of rehab. Is that right? I've not followed his story super close.
I hope he has. I mean,
we hope he has. Here's the thing. I think it would be worth, if he gets reinstated and that actually goes through, I think that it would be worth and would be wise of Light to maybe at least talk to him and just bring him down and see, because I do believe that people change. Some people believe that people don't change. I don't believe that. I am of the mindset and the belief that people can get better. People do change. And people can actually get worse. Like it goes both ways. I think you at least consider it and see where he is, see where his mind is right now, because certainly the talent is there. But it would be on some very stringent 1 year prove it kind of a deal, probably not worth a lot of money. But I'd want to, that would be the only thing that I would say. I would be willing to at least have that conversation. But I'd have to know that there's been some turnaround. There's been some changes in this young man's life before I want to bring him in. Because as you say, I am going to be watching out for the locker room. I'm going to be watching out for for what he brings to the team. And if he's going to bring poison into the team, and not just substance wise, but culture wise, then absolutely not. We pass on him. But I would at least entertain having the conversation about Josh Gordon. I don't think it's a slam. I don't think it's a slam the book shut on him. No, but I'd really have to be convinced to do something different with him. But I'd at least like to have that conversation. See where he's at is what I would do. So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, I'd give him a 3-year deal, but something like I think they put in, I don't know for a fact, but it seems pretty obvious they put into Doug Martin's contract was, any hint of wrongdoing, the money we owe you, we no longer owe you.
Right.
Like if you mess up one more time, like this contract does not exist. But to what you say about bringing poison in the locker room, that would have to be the biggest thing. Would have to be like, what kind of person is he? Is he I always thought, and not to run a guy down, but I was never a fan of Kellen Winslow Jr. as a Buccaneer.
Yeah.
I just didn't like his attitude. He was like too cool for school, and I think he brought some of the players with him away from trying to be the best they could be and making it about football and making it about the Bucs and more making it about themselves. So I can see Josh Gordon. Maybe I've never met the guy obviously and don't know anything much about him, but if he falls in like slides towards that side of the landscape, then yeah, I'd pass on him.
Yeah, and I mean, there's another game. There's another name who I've seen bubble up on social media here lately, that I think falls in exactly that same camp. And as we're talking about a potential new backup quarterback, Johnny Manziel is a name that I've seen as a guy who's trying to get back into the league. I saw that he kind of reunited with his manager. He rehired his manager, although I believe it was his manager who fired him as a client, at the end of last year. But he's talked about he is going to submit himself for, drug testing, and he's really trying to get back to the game of football and get back to where he needs to be. So is this evidence of a guy who has been changed, who has seen the light, so to speak?
Or did you run out of money?
Yeah, I mean, what is it? I don't know. I think it's worth at least having a conversation. But again, you've got to weigh that out. But I would enter that very, very, very cautiously. But it'd be an interesting conversation to have. And for Johnny Manziel and Josh Gordon both, I wish them all the best of luck. Moving forward, I really hope that, on a personal, same thing actually we've said with Doug Martin. I hope they get, for their own personal sake, I hope they get certain things in their life in order. And we'd love to see them back on the football field, having the best years of their career, on this side of it. So, that's what I'd love to see for them just on a human level. So, but all of that said, let's move off of wide receiver and move on to another position group, tight ends. This is certainly, I think, a position that the Bucs could use some help in, because really we have Cameron Brate and we have Luke Stocker. I guess he's still around.
Luke Stocker, Alan Cross.
Yeah, Alan Cross. Those are, Yeah, we have those guys. But some of the names that pop up on the list here are Metellus Bennett out of the New England Patriots, Jack Doyle, Vernon Davis from the Redskins as well. Man, they seem like they're losing everybody. Jared Cook out of the Packers, Jacob Tamme from the Falcons, who I had on one of my fantasy leagues this last year. And
how do you do? He's pretty solid, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I had him benched or if I was playing him throughout the year. I think I went back and forth on him a few times. But yeah, so those are some of the names that really, really bubble up to the top there. Anything on free agents out of the tight end group this year that we should be keeping an eye on as Bucs fans?
Well, Jason Light wants someone who can block and someone who can catch, or at least get open. And because he doesn't have that yet. I mean, Cameron Brate came out of nowhere and wowed us all, and he can catch, but he really struggles putting his hand in dirt and blocking. Luke Stocker's just the opposite. He can block, for days on end, but he really can't separate. So he's been looking for the guy who can do both. Martellus Bennett is a great name out there. I think he's just gonna be out of the price range. And once again, and like to my little combine, tease we had earlier, like this tight end class is ridiculous. You could get, there's guys that fit the bill that are in there, but if we're looking straight at free agency, I like Jared Cook's athletic ability, but he just hasn't really put it all together. It's like every time you think he's going to break out, he just disappears. Trey Burton was somebody who I was kind of high on, but the Eagles put a second round tender on him. And then there are one or two other guys, like you said, Vernon Davis, but he's 33. But Luke Wilson out of the Seahawks, he's interesting. But for what Jason Light's looking for, I think Jack Doyle, I've said it, I've written articles on the guy from the Indianapolis Colts. I just think he's the guy. If they're going to go after a tight end in free agency, I think that's the guy that will pop up in the names.
So it's not going to be necessarily the big name like the Martellus Bennett. You think it's going to be a guy like Jack Doyle?
Yeah, it will definitely be like a guy like Jack Doyle. Yeah, Jordan Cameron's getting some, getting a little publicity, but Yeah, it's a tough one. This is kind of like a lean. It's a lean class. It really is. It's like
Right.
there's Martellus Bennett, and then there's everybody else. But I really think that Jack Doyle is kind of like the diamond in a rough, so to speak. He can do both, and I think he's really underrated as a player.
Do you think that means we could get him for the right price?
Yeah, you know, when I first started writing about that guy, like no one knew him. Like no one was talking about him. And now as it's getting closer to free agency, I hear his name popping up and more, up more and more and more. So I'm not necessarily convinced that he's gonna be cheap, or the Bucs get him at the right price. So it's a really hard one. I mean, Michael Rivera out of the Raiders, he might be a guy that the Bucs might, kick the tires on. Jermaine Gresham from the Cardinals might be a guy they kick the tire on because I think they're going to be a little less expensive. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not totally convinced they're gonna upgrade because they could get the guy they want like in the first three. Like they don't have to wait till like round one. Like there's probably 7 or 8 tight ends that fit the bill one way or the other. There's only like 3 or 4 guys that I think are a perfect fit. But there's great athletes and guys that can block really well and catch really well, and a few of them, a handful of them that can do both. So, yeah, so that's what I got.
Yeah, and as you say that, I mean, we did offer Cameron Brate a tender, so he'll be back with the team this year. We've still got Luke Stalker under contract. Brandon Myers.
He's a free agent.
He's a free agent. If they do bring him back, he's going to have to fight for his position in camp. And I mean, he almost lost it last year. And so if they do bring him back, he'll be back to competing for the job again. And who knows what'll happen. But as we talk about that, bringing in kind of a veteran person and pairing them up with maybe a new draftee, assuming we'll probably draft a tight end, which we argued a first round tight end draft pick this coming draft is really not a bad. It's not out of the realm of possibility for sure, and it's not necessarily a bad choice either, depending on what happens in the 18 picks before them. But we do have a little bit of veteran-esque experience that can help coach that up already on the team. Like this isn't something we've got to bring in as a free agent, because there is Luke Stalker who's been around for several years, and even Cameron Brate who's still young, but he's still been around. And here's a guy who really has, he came in as an undrafted free agent, bounced around for a little bit before actually landing with the Bucs, and then it proved himself big time in this last offseason or in this last season. So we have a little bit of that already in house. So the need to go out and necessarily get another person, I just don't think is there. And as you say, it'll be interesting to see, but this is not a position that I look to see the Bucs make a splash in here during free agency with the limited number that we've kind of said that we'll expect to see them get. I don't know if this position is even worth talking about, but there is the offensive tackles that are coming out this year. Is this even a topic that we, Gosder Sherless is one of the guys that comes up here, but we don't anticipate really seeing him back in a uniform anywhere, really, I think is what we had said. But, Riley Rife out of the Lions, Ricky Wagner, William Beatty, Matt Khalil out of Vikings. And anybody trickles to the top, or is this just kind of a position that we're just really going to pass over, you think?
I think we could pass over the offensive line entirely. I did no research on centers, guards, or tackles. If you listen, Jason Light and Dirk Cutter are telling you that they like their offensive line. They like their guys.
Yeah.
Dirk Cutter said on his exit presser. They both said it at their pressers at the Combine. I mean, I don't know how they can make it any clearer besides like coming right out and go, we're not taking anyone free agency and we're not drafting anyone.
Yeah.
Because it might happen. It might take like a 7th round flyer, and there's gonna be a bunch of undrafted free agents coming in after the draft because you just first off need camp bodies, and they're going to bring guys in they think they can compete. But I would not look for any. And you could make an argument about center, but I really think they're going to try Alley there. And as of now, they've got 4 centers on the roster, and that doesn't include Alley. So
Right.
I mean, they've got their bases covered as center. I didn't write anybody down for tackle. I didn't write anybody for guard. I didn't write anybody down for center. I just don't. They're telling you, besides coming looking right in your face and saying we're not going to take anybody, but that's what they're saying.
Right. Well, we'll just skip over the tackles. We'll actually go ahead and skip over the guards. In the center, again, the only one, Joe Holly, we've talked about him, quite a bit. A lot of people kind of down on him, including us. As much as I hate to be down on him, I'm just going, I don't really know. He is listed as, from Bleacher Report as one of the top center free agents that's coming out. And it wouldn't surprise me to see us re-sign him. But as you say, we've got 4 that are under contract right now. 4 that are with the team, and not counting Alley. And a lot of people are talking about moving Alley over. So I don't know. I think that's I think the answer for center is already in Tampa. And same thing with the rest. We may, if we do anything, it may just be for more future development type stuff for anywhere across the offensive line. So let's take a turn over to perhaps a more fun position now to talk about. Let's talk about defensive ends. And unless you've been living under a rock, there's actually already been some news surrounding this particular position with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in that we have officially re-signed Will Golston.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a pretty I don't know if this is technically a big contract, but I mean, it's a 5-year deal, worth ultimately it could be about $36.5 million. That includes some incentives and various things. Looks like it'll be a base of about maybe $5.5 million a year for him. So congrats to Will Golston. I love having you back. And so that's good news. However, the question is are we looking to add some more depth, because we still have Noah Spence, we still have Robert Ayers, Jacque Smith is supposed to be coming back. So, we're doing okay at this position. I think the question is do we want to look at any of these other guys? Calais Campbell out of the Cardinals, I think, has been the guy who's been most connected with the Bucs at this point. But there's also Jason Pierre-Paul from the Giants, Andre Branch out of the Dolphins, Devin Taylor from the Lions. Anybody else that kind of bubbles up to the top for you that Bucs fans should be keeping an eye on for you, Ren? What do you think?
I actually have Calais Campbell as a defensive tackle under my breakdown list, but he plays both. So, well, you mentioned it. I mean, Jacque Smith, they have till Thursday. He's a restricted free agent. If everybody will recall, he basically got hurt on the first play of the Atlanta game, and he was really spiking as a pass rushing defensive end. So I'm gonna think the Bucs are gonna treat that like a draft choice, like they are gonna do with J.R. Sweezy. Golston obviously is a big sign. I mean, we've talked about it. The Bucs signing their own guys free agency revolved around that guy. Like, that was if you could take anybody, that was the one guy that that we wanted back. Charles Johnson, he's a guy who's kind of interesting. The Bucs actually had him in $1 last year, offered him a bigger contract. They ended up signing for it with the Panthers. He went back to the Panthers, who basically said he didn't want to play for the Buccaneers because he's a Panther. He's not supposed to like the Buccaneers. So they might still have interest in him, but maybe once they heard he said that, maybe they don't have interest in him anymore. That's kind of strange. Julius Peppers just came out on the market, which is kind of interesting. But I think he's going to try to pull like a Chris Long deal where he's just going to go, he's looking to play for the Patriots for a 1-year deal and try to grab a ring. And a lot of guys have been re-signed. Like, you were talking about Jason Pierre-Paul, like he got franchised by the Giants. Chandler Jones, he got franchised by the Cardinals. Mario Addison, he re-signed with the Patriots. So Dwight Freeney's a guy that I like. If the Bucs looking for a bridge player, If they feel that they don't have that edge rushing, say maybe Jabbercast Smith isn't going to be back in time, or his rehab isn't going the way, or maybe they just, because they have till Thursday to be able to tender him an offer, and maybe they don't. Dwight Freeney, he's still getting it done. Could be like a gap player, just a 1-year rental to get some sacks in there. Besides that, it's just a bunch of mediocre guys. Nothing that are too outstanding. Kind of like the tight end areas where either the high production guys are over 30, and a lot of them are way over 30, like they're pushing like 34, 35, and then the low production guys that are the age that you want to sign. Like I said, they're low production guys. I don't really see the Bucs going after a defensive end in free agency, but if they did, those are some guys you could probably look for: Charles Johnson, Dwight Freeney, maybe Chris Long because he's a free agent.
Chris Long is the only guy, honestly, that kind of bubbles to the surface for me out of all of these guys. And really, again, it's actually the same reason that LeGarrette Blount bubbles to the surface of, here's a guy who's been in a winning system. If he's available, if they can get him, it might be something you want to bring down. But, you always want more depth along your defensive line, but this is not exactly an area that we're suffering at right now. Like, we're not hemorrhaging at this. So, this isn't going to be something that I see us taking a big swing on during a free agency at this particular position. But Chris Long, for me personally, he's the only one who really bubbles to the top outside of our, signing our own guys between Will Golston and Jabbercast Smith.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. There's one or two guys. Signing Will Golston is it is just because he played on your team last year. That is the defensive end, signing, and bringing back Jabbercast Smith and see what he can do. I think that's pretty much it as far as defensive end. Now, defensive tackle, that's another story.
Well, let's talk about defensive tackles. A couple of the big names that are popping up on defensive tackles free agents this year: Quan Short over at the Panthers, Dontari Poe over at the Chiefs. Jonathan Hankins over at Giants, Benny Logan with the Eagles, and then Nick Fairley with the Saints are kind of the big names that are popping up there. Any thoughts on any of those guys, or maybe some of the other ones we didn't name?
Yeah, you're pretty much it. This is, I think, is a spot where the Bucs are going to spend some money. This is where they're going to go after a guy because, please, lordy, get Joe McCoy some help. We've talked about it in past podcasts about how great it would be to be able to get somebody in there who's good enough at defensive tackle to continuously beat one-on-one blocking by the guard, so you can't double Joe McCoy all the time.
Right.
Calais Campbell, you talked about with defensive end. I'm going to talk about him with defensive tackle. The Bucs are linked to him. There's a lot of whispers about it. That's about as far as it's gone. He's going to be top dollar. Probably one of the biggest contracts for free agency, and he's going to have a lot of suitors. So, like you said, Jonathan Hankins, he's really good, but he kind of underperformed with the Giants. He was hurt a little bit, but he's a great run stopper. But he also, he can get to the passer. Then the same guys you talked about, Dontari Poe with the Chiefs. I like him. Dominique Easley, Beanie Logan's a real guy I like out of Philly. Not much of a pass rusher, but really stuffs that middle up, which I think would help out McCoy a lot. Nick Fairley, he's going to be somebody you're going to have to kick the tires on, bring in, look at face to face. He's got a reputation for being a poor motor guy, poor motivated player. And the last guy that I kind of like is Vance Walker. This guy was supposed to be the next big thing in Denver, and unfortunately, he blew out his ACL pretty early, so he didn't get a chance to see what he could do. Now he's back out there. Who knows if Denver wants him? I think he's being used wrong. They're using him as a stand-up outside, the hybrid pass rusher linebacker like Von Miller, but I think he's more of a hand in the dirt player, and I think that yeah, I think he's just much better, should I say, for a 4-3 scheme defense than a 3-4. So that's something, those guys, I think one of them will end up with the Bucs this year.
Yeah, I honestly don't know any of these guys. Like, I can't speak to any of them, so I'll go with exactly what you said there. Yeah, the I was just looking at it, the Calais Campbell situation. They're apparently last year he made $11 million, and so they're expecting that his base, whatever, will actually wind up being more than that. Get him go over the only thing against him just going is he's got a little bit of age on him. He's 30 years old. Hasn't quite hit the double-digit sack, which is honestly, that's a thing we're going for in Tampa, is we got to get somebody on that double-digit sack. But honestly, I still think it could be Gerald McCoy. Call me crazy. I think it could be him if we get him some freaking help along the line, to where he's not being double-teamed. Somebody who can really have a threat over there that teams will have to plan for. So, and that's nothing against anybody else that we've had. Our defensive line was not bad this last year. There were times when it was not as good as it had been at other times, but it was not a bad line. And big shout out to Jay Hayes for coaching that up. But it certainly still could use some more depth. It could get a big improvement. So yeah, I'll be real interested to see what, if anything, happens out of this come free agency. Come noon tomorrow, and see who's linked. It'd be real interesting to see. Now, how about let's move back to the linebacker. We'll take. We'll just kind of together do inside and outside linebackers together. But some of the names linked here: Dante Hightower, Perry Riley out of the Raiders. There's also Chandler Jones out of Arizona, Melvin Ingram out of the Chargers, Nick Perry out of the Packers, a couple other guys. Any thoughts on the linebacker position?
Well, as far as inside linebackers, I don't think they're even going to look. They didn't carry a lot. The Buccaneers didn't carry a lot of linebacker depth last year. Mm-hmm. They drafted Bond, but he was an IR. Then they had Darryl Smith, and then after that, it was just really like Lynch and Glanton, and that was pretty much what they carried the whole entire year. So I don't think, the only thing I can see them bringing somebody in is to fill Darryl Smith's spot. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to bring him back. Maybe they bring somebody in because they're not 100% confident in what Devontae Bond can do and a Darius Glanton, but I think they kind of stick there. And if they don't, I think it's to be a bridge player. And the only one I can really see is somebody like Carlos Dansby out of Cincinnati. A veteran. Basically, he's Darryl Smith all over again. A veteran that was high production, earlier in his career, has really great football smarts, but he's going to become a liability in coverage, so he's only going to be like on first down and things like that. But I would be surprised if the Buccaneers picked up any free agent linebackers, and I would be doubly surprised if they did, and anybody actually knew who they were.
Fair enough. All right, moving back to a position that I think was. I certainly saw some improvement this last year. We're talking about cornerbacks, free agents who are coming up as cornerbacks. We got a couple guys, Stephen Gilmore out of the Bills, Tremaine Johnson out of the Rams, a couple other guys. Anybody jump out at you? Prince Amukamara, I believe is how you say his name.
I can't believe you tried that.
Hey, I just had to throw that one out. I don't know. That one was less scary to me than Captain Munnerlin. But anyway, Josh Robinson is a name who is actually popping up in this list as well, which I don't know if we've offered him yet or re-signed him yet, but we absolutely should do that one. But what do you think? Cornerbacks, free agents coming up.
Yeah, I think, since we do have Grimes and Hargraves, Grimes still, like you said, he'll be back this year. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to go any one of the top guys like Malcolm Butler or AJ Bowie. Like, I don't think those guys are going to be coming around. I think it's another very deep draft at cornerback, and I think they're going to go after a guy. You have to remember that Ryan Smith now has switched from safety to corner. I don't really think it's a need for them in free safety. If they're going to, and this is just my opinion, it's somebody like I did like Trumaine Johnson, but actually he signed. He got franchised by the Rams today.
I saw that.
Yeah. So he was somebody I'm looking at. But Dre Kirkpatrick, another Bengal, another guy out of Cincinnati. He kind of got drafted, and he was high, second, third round. But the light never came on. He never got it, until this year. And he Pro Football Focus, love him or hate him. It always seems that when they say something nice about your player, it's like, oh yeah, and then when they say something bad about your player, you're like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. But they had, I mean, it never fails. But Drake Kirkpatrick actually graded out best against deep balls, against the fly move, the 9 route.
Huh.
He's 27 years old, and I know he's going to command money. And this is a little bit out of the box. So you put Grimes on the outside, and you put Kirkpatrick on the other outside, and you kick BH3 in the slot for a year.
Yeah.
Until Grimes takes off, and then you have your Kirkpatrick and BH3 for your outside corners. Going forward for 2018. That's just an assumption. Once again, I think it's going to sort of fall in the the linebacker. If they draft somebody, you're probably not going to know it. It's kind of like last year when we got Josh Robinson. He was really fast, but he blew his knee out and he hadn't played all year. So when we signed this guy out of Minnesota, like no one knew who he was. So if they do, which I think, you can never have enough good corners, but I think what they have in Robinson and Ryan Smith right now. And since it's so deep in the draft, they could find like a 3rd round cornerback, like in the 6th round.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're going to stand pat. But if you're making me choose, I like somebody like Kirkpatrick, and I think everybody else, because corners get paid so much now, they're just going to get priced out. It's not a need.
Sure. Yeah, I have nothing to add. So sure, cornerback. I mean, the point of this just being that we have players that are already established in this position. I just don't see it as being a place we're going to go after anybody with big money. Except, and it's not even going to be big money, but we're going to go after Josh Robinson. He'll be the guy we look to bring back out of this whole group. So at least that's what I think. All right, moving on. We have 2 more spots to talk about. Let's finish up the defense with the safety position. They have Eric Berry, who is listed here, who I know has already re-signed with the Chiefs. Tony Jefferson out of the Cardinals. Barry Church out of the Cowboys. Jonathan Cyprien, thank you, out of the Jaguars. Quentin Demps out of the Texans. A handful of others, including Chris Conte, our very own guy, who I believe we have reserved seat A4 on the Greyhound bus, leaving tomorrow afternoon. So, what do you think? What do you think about the safety position?
I think this is another big spending spot for the Bucs. Long-term contract guy. They only have 2 safeties on the roster right now. Brad McDougal's out there, so they could bring him back. But I'm pushing for Tony Jefferson. A lot of people are. Nothing's been linked, but everyone's talking about Tony Jefferson since they've heard his name.
Mm-hmm.
I like Cyprien as well out of Jacksonville. Somebody you might hear. A couple of interesting names besides Bradley McDougal, of course, we all know. And I'll finish up with these guys. If they miss, and this is just me, thinking that they go after Tony Jefferson and Jonathan Cyprien, and say they miss, say they don't get their guy. I think this guy, Mike Adams, with the Colts would be somebody they'd look for. An older player, but plays at a high level. One of these years, very soon, it's going to be where his talent falls off the cliff. But as of now, it still hasn't. So it could be a guy they bring in for 2 years, only guarantee the first year, sort of a bridge player to once again a extremely deep safety class in the draft. And then another guy, Micah Hyde from the Packers. He can play safety, he can play cornerback, and he also returns kicks. So you know how Jason Light and Dirk Cutter love their versatility guys.
Sure.
He's only 26. You know, he's just entering his prime. He's not an elite player like Cyprien or Tony Jefferson, but it's something that he could grow into, like the Bucs are planning with Will Golston. You know, they're planning on him growing into being a better player. And so Micah Hyde is somebody you might want to pay attention to. You might hear, one or two. And then, the usual players are around, like guys you haven't heard of, and some people like, you've heard Bird from the Saints just because we play him twice a year and things like that. But I think personally, it's all in at the safety position in the free agency market. So I'm hoping Tony Jefferson, but I'd be happy with Cyprien as well.
Well, that is certainly something we'll have to sit back and watch very closely here over the next couple of days. I think the one thing that potentially we could be looking at is Chris Conte. We have kind of joked around about riding him out of town, but there have been some articles that have come out over the last couple of days, and even listening to the press conference. People speculating that both Chris Conte and Bradley McDougald could be back in the fold with Tampa Bay. They could be bringing them both back. I don't see how that's possible. I got to be honest with you, but that is the reports. That is what some people are saying as they're coming out about those guys. But yeah, I agree. Safety. I said all year last year up until the very end that was my biggest area of concern for the team, and it is. It is my number 2. Yeah, it's my number 2 now, so it's still one of the top ones. So I think it's an area they have to look at. I think they have to try to bring somebody in, or at least make a real big push. They might miss on somebody, but I think they've got to at least make a real big, high profile push in the area of safety. All right, we got one more position as we wrap up this segment of the Pewtercast today. We're talking about kickers and punters. Now, obviously, we're not going to be looking for a punter. We have our guy. We've signed him to a pretty long-term contract. But we do have this whole question mark of our kicker in Roberto Aguayo. He was a round 2 pick. We went up to get him. He had a very mediocre at best year. You could even call it a poor year. People know that I've been a big defender of the guy. # I'm with 19. And but that said, should we look at bringing in a kicker to compete with him, or should we give him another year? That said, they only list Steven Hauschka out of Seattle and Greg Zuerlein out of the Rams as people that are going to be available for kicking this year. Any thoughts on who might be available, and what do we do at the kicker position?
Well, there's tons of guys that are out there that you've probably heard of. Like, one of my favorite is Caleb Sturgis. That's because I'm a Florida guy and he went there. Like Nick Folk, has been released recently. Like you said, Hauschka, Cario Santos, he's a restricted free agent for the Chiefs. So if you really want to get one, you can get one. But like Phil Dawson's a name you've heard. Nick Novak's a name you've heard. But I don't think they're bringing any of these guys. I think they're going to bring in competition for them, but they're all going to be college guys or guys that are not in the league right now, undrafted free agents to give Aguayo competition through the training camp and OTAs. He's going to have to stink it up just as bad as he did last preseason for him to lose the job. I think this is. Yeah, I think this is it. I mean, I don't think they're looking to replace him like actively, but they're going to bring in competition just in case to cover their tracks. But he's really going to have a really bad preseason for a move to be made. So I don't see any of these guys on the board being signed for any amount of money to be brought in for the Bucs.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The kicker position, especially when the only reason, let's just say this, the only reason Roberto Aguayo had the amount of pressure put on him last year was because of where he got drafted. By the way, he didn't draft himself. Somebody else did that. Jason Light did that. So to put that kind of pressure on a young man his first year out, while I certainly understand it, I really understand why fans and media and fringe media like us would put that kind of pressure on the man. He seems to be right on track, and he finished the year much better than he started the year. So to come in and disrupt that now by bringing in a high profile kicker who's going to displace him just doesn't seem smart, and it seems like a waste of 2 picks out of a draft. Listen, Jason Light has no problem saying, hey, we made a mistake here. We're going to cut our losses and move on. And if that's the case with Roberto, fine. And there have been other media outlets that are friends of this show, some of them who have actually guested on this show, who have been advocating for bringing in somebody more than just an undrafted free agent or somebody more than somebody right out of college, but an actual legitimate competitor for the job. Because all those people that you mentioned are probably not taking his job. Like, they would have to come in and be something extra special, and Roberto would have to be extra horrible in really his second year, going into his second year. It's just hard, I think, to judge any draft pick, but even that one off of 1 year, where honestly he did better in the latter half of his year. He did come along. So I think Roberto showed enough. I think he's going to be back. We can bring in quote unquote competition. I just don't think it's going to, I don't think it's going to stick. I'd be super surprised to see if something like that happens. So I just don't see anything coming out of this. And that may make a lot of Bucs fans really kind of pissed off, but I just don't see it. That's not even a personal opinion. I just don't, that's not a personal opinion of what I want to see. Let's put it that way. I just don't see that actually happening regardless of what I think. So, so those are my thoughts on the kicker.
Yeah, I'm with you. He gets another year. This is it. Like, this is make it or break it. He's going to have to lose a leg to not have the job day one.
Exactly. So just to recap, just so we can kind of put a thing, as far as positions that people need to be watching, things that we're probably going to be hearing about, it sounds like what we're kind of saying is that wide receiver position. It sounds like we've already got Deshaun Jackson, at least on the hook for that position. We should be looking and probably expect to see something there in free agency. We probably should be looking at the defensive line position, particularly that Calais Campbell, but looking to add some more depth through the free agency, even if maybe it's a little bit of an older person looking there, and then certainly safety. That would be another area that we would expect to see something in the free agency, and maybe even be a little bit surprised if we don't. And then a couple of question marks. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. See somebody in tight end. Maybe we'll see somebody in cornerback, and possibly, long shot, depending on what it is, maybe we might look at another quarterback specifically to be a backup that would be an upgrade over Ryan Griffin. Other than that, we're probably not looking for much out of the free agency. And does that seem like a pretty good recap, I think, of what we've just been saying here?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I would just add the running back into the tight end, the tight end cornerback, just because it's not going to be such a big name. I mean, we need a running back. All we have is Sims and Barber.
Right.
But yeah, safety. And I think those are going to be the big splash signings as well. Safety, wide receiver, and somewhere along the defensive line, I think it's going to be a defensive tackle. So for me, defensive tackle, safety, and wide receiver are the positions that you should really concentrate on this free agency.
All right. Well, Bucs fans, that's going to wrap up this particular conversation. And now we would like to know your thoughts on our thoughts. You can do that by shooting an email to us to thepewtercast@gmail.com, or you can find us on the Twitter sphere @thepewtercast, or find us on facebook.com/thepewtercast. We do respond to all forms of feedback, and it's really one of the best ways to grow the community of this show just a little bit, which, by the way, like I said, We doubled our previous winning, most downloaded show. So who knows what we can do with this coming episode. The community is growing, folks. I love seeing that. Welcome to all of you who are new to the Pewtercast. Well, guys, coming up next, it is our top 3 free agents in Bucs history. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, Pewtercast fans, happy off season. Hope you guys are soaking in the time off and enjoying okay, let's be honest. Aren't we all just ready to get back to some dang football? Well, guys, I can't do anything about the calendar, but maybe I can help us just a little bit and kind of keeping football at front and center where it deserves to be. And I'm going to do that by doing our first ever Pewtercast giveaway. Now, you've heard us talking about changes that are coming to the Pewtercast. This is going to be one of them. We're going to start doing some giveaways, which is going to be a ton of fun. And that's right, it is a giveaway. This is something for free. You don't have to pay us for it. It's absolutely free. And here's what we're giving away. We're going to be giving away an autographed picture of Kevin Pamphile. He was nice enough to send me over one of these, and we're going to turn around and send it back out to one of you guys, one of our fans. It's pretty cool. It's a full-color photo of him. His signature is pretty clear as day, and we're going to be giving it away. And all you have to do to enter to win this is head over to iTunes and leave us a review. That's all you got to do. Now, if you're already subscribed to us on iTunes, you're going to need to search for us like you aren't subscribed to us, and you'll see the review tab there. You leave the review, take a quick screenshot of it before you hit submit, okay? Just before you do that, and then send it over to me saying, hey, this was my review, and email it to me at thepewtercast@gmail.com. That's it. Leave us a review, send us the screenshot, and you're entered to win. It's as simple as that. Welcome back to the Pewtercast. You're listening to episode 30, Let the Tampa'ing Begin. For today's top 3, since we're kind of on the precipice of the free agent season, we thought we'd take a look back at the free agents of Bucs history and rank our top 3 free agents. So, Ren, I'm going to toss it to you first, my friend. What criteria did you use in picking your top 3, and what is your number 3 pick?
My criteria was Buccaneer free agents that played well for the Buccaneers. Pretty simple. The more you get into this list, we've signed some pretty big name free agents, but man, a lot of them just didn't work out. Darrelle Revis is the one that obviously comes to mind. The biggest, but first round draft choice, and then, the next coach just lets him go.
Which, by the way, yeah. I mean that right there, that is why having a revolving door at head coach doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just does not work. You've got to pick a guy and you've just got to stay with them. Even if he has a lousy first couple of seasons, not saying anything about recent history. I like where we are right now. Let's just stay here for a while. Keep going. Sorry.
No, I'm with you. I feel you. Since it is such a short list, honestly, I got a little creative with this one. So my number 3 best Bucs free agent, I'm going with Joe Jurevicius.
Good pick.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Joe Jurevicius wasn't around long, has made some of the best catches as a Buccaneer, 2 of them in one game against Philadelphia on a Monday night. And then I believe the same year, but the year before, he had that crossing route. Brad Johnson hit him. He took it all the way to the house to help us win that NFC Championship game against Philadelphia. Like I said, he wasn't around long, but the community really latched on to him, and he made big play after big play after big play. So as number 3, and I want to give him a little recognition for people to remember our guy, Joe Jurevicius.
You know why? Is because his name is just so gosh darn fun to say. Joe Jurevicius. It really is. It just rolls off the tongue. Joe Jurevicius. Yeah, that's a good pick. He is in my honorable mentions list for sure. I can't. I really don't know why this guy has such the nostalgia feeling of I mean, he was part of that Super Bowl winning team. But he was not a prolific player, and he certainly wasn't here for a ton of years. But I just loved every time I watched, every time the ball came his way, he did what he needed to do, and it was just great to see. So, man, I like it just because I like saying Joe Jurevicius. Good
Joe Jurevicius.
There you go.
Hey, well, what do you got?
Yeah, well, for criteria, I did put a little bit more criteria other than just free agents and did they do good for the Bucs. But what I did was I kind of said it could apply to anyone who's been a free agent for the Buccaneers, including current free agents who are still on the roster. I think I always have to make that determination with these: is do I count people who are still on the team right now, or do I kind of knock those guys off and just talk about people in history? But so really, it's anyone before this year. And as people are listening, let's just say they signed Deshaun Jackson. Well, I can't pick him yet, obviously, because we don't know what he's going to do. But in determining their worth and their value, really, what I kind of tended to look was how much of an impact they made on the team, as well as what survived them afterwards. Like what did they bring to the team, and what continues to this day as a result of them being on this team. Like that was not just what was affected while they were here, but also does anything go forward? Because there really is, several good free agents we could really be talking about. And I think the good ones bubble to the top pretty clearly as far as who they are. So for my number 3 is actually a guy who is on the roster right now. And he ranks 3rd because his time's not done yet. And so the full effect of this guy being on our roster has not yet been realized. But I believe that of all the players outside of Jameis, this guy is the player who is most responsible for part of the culture turn that we're seeing right now. And of course, I'm talking about our defensive end, Robert Ayers.
Man, you love that guy.
I do. I really, really do. I
love that guy.
I'm big on this guy. He is, I like what he's bringing to the team, and every day that goes by, everything I see out of him, I continue to like him a little bit more. But I'm predicting this. This is more, I think, of a predictive pick than it is I can point to stuff right now. I think as the years go by, when we sit back and we look at the effect of Robert Ayers and the ongoing impact he will have had on this team, with being in contact with young guys like Noah Spence, and what he'll I think have been able to do even for Gerald McCoy, having that on the defensive line, and even maybe what we see out of Will Golston. Yes. I'd be real interested to know how much of Will Golston's contract this year he kind of owes to Robert Ayers for the influence that Robert Ayers had on him over this last year. Because certainly, while we've known Will Golston for a lot of years now, it was this last year that he really began to fully make his mark, that made us say, yes, let's re-sign him. Yes, let's give him big money. And so I just think that when you look at the impact that they've had and how it will carry on further, that this is going to be one of those things that we see, and that Robert Ayers is there. And the other way is talking about on the field stuff too. Remember this last year when people wanted to run Mike Smith out of town on a pole, kind of for the latter part of the first half of the season. Well, where was Ayers while that was happening? Well, he was on the sideline, right? Or maybe he was just coming back from injury. But when Ayers really kind of started started going full steam and got really healthy, instilling values into this team, that's when this defensive line last year really came on, and the defense as a whole really started to come on. And I'm not saying it was just Robert Ayers. I know there was a lot involved with that, change in communication style and, the big look yourself in the mirror moment after that Atlanta loss, the blowout to Atlanta. But for all of those reasons, he makes my number 3 at best free agent signing. I think future is going to tell us, history is going to tell us that he is going to be way more impactful than we've even come to realize right now.
Did you send him a Valentine this year?
No, I didn't, but I did send him a Pewtercast award that was of my own design and making.
That's even better. I thought of that. I gave Brent Grimes and Robert Ayers both, a pass through in my mind about putting him down on this list, but due to longevity, and I'm not saying, they're not gonna make the list, like if you ask me 3-4 years from now, but yeah, that was just the reason I didn't put those guys on there, and because I didn't want to shortchange anybody that who had more contributions or longer contributions. I didn't think you were going to go with somebody like Ayers, so now I'm kind of in a pickle because I got 4 guys that I really want to give props to, and I'm going to hope that you go with 2 of them. So I'm going to go.
Well, that's why we have honorable mentions. So
yeah, but I want to be honorable mentions. I want to be in the top 3. But okay, then I'll skip this guy and I'll put him in the honorable mentions. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, so number 2, for me, it's pretty obvious. A lot of people might put him as number 1. You could say statistically that he has been the best free agent, and that's who we've talked about already during this podcast. It's Vincent Jackson. 7 years, 5 of those years were stellar. Helped develop Jameis Winston. The best before Jameis Winston, the best Buccaneer as far as touchdowns thrown in a season and yardage was Josh Freeman, and that's because he was throwing to Vincent Jackson. So he really panned out. He came in here. What's so weird is I remember there being character issues about this guy. There was kind of rumbling. Oh, he's not really a locker room guy. Yeah, that could not be further from the truth.
Right.
If you give me 100 adjectives to describe, Vincent Jackson, bad guy would never, poor attitude would never come up. So,
in fact, I think the opposite of those would be the things that would come up.
Yeah, you would think of 100 things, the opposite of those before you even got to. You wouldn't even think you would just sweep it off the table. Okay, these are already off. So yeah, so for my number 2, because. He just was. It was a 7-year deal. It was a big deal as far as money wise, and he earned every penny of it. So number 2 for me for Bucs free agent of all time, Vincent Jackson.
Man, I love it. It's so hard to refute that. It really is. Vincent Jackson did not make my top 3, but he is absolutely one of my honorable mentions. If we fully knew his fate with the Bucs, that might have been just a little bit different. But man, you can't underestimate the value of this guy and what he's meant to this team. And he's stuck with this team through some really rotten years. I mean, not that he had a choice; he had a big contract, but still,
could pay a lot of money.
Right. But for the engagement that he's had, I mean, this guy, I think this was the 3rd year in a row he was our pick for our candidate in Tampa for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So, it just speaks to who this guy is, and he is a guy. When I talk about impact, that's going to go on. You're going to feel that. I think, you're going to see that, like I said, through Mike Evans. You're going to see that through some of these other guys. And we're going to continue to feel the effect of Vincent Jackson for quite a few years to come. And we'll talk about him, I'm sure, here in just a few more minutes. But for my number 2, I'm reaching back to yesteryear. I am going. I'm going
You're
there.
gonna take my number 1.
Probably. Who was actually, I believe, if my research is correct, he is the very first free agent that Tampa Bay had ever signed in 1993. And I'm talking about Hardy Nickerson. Hardy was playing during the turnaround of the franchise, and he really was the one who kind of helped usher that in. Aside from that, just statistically, he played every single game that he was on the team for. I think it was like 104, 108 or something like that games. He set the expectation for what could be one of the best defenses the NFL has ever seen before that defense was ever formed or formulated. Like he embodied what would go on to become that idea of Buccaneer football. And, I'll be honest with you. I think there's a real conversation to be had about the great defenses of NFL history. And we all know that the 2002 Bucs are going to be in that conversation, but I think they really could be at the top of the list over the Iron Curtain and, the 85 Bears and some of those other great defenses. That defense was just so stellar, and they really have Hardy Nickerson. They built so much on him that I pick him for my personal number 2.
Yeah, I don't know who you're going to take number 1. He was, like you said, he was the first one, and you always like to talk about culture change, and he was it. He started it. He played most of his career in the creamsicle and white, but the nastiness and toughness and like, hey, we're not going to be pushed around anymore. We're here to play and we're here to compete. That all came from Hardy Nickerson. When he came in and it was like preseason games. I remember articles in the papers and writers just saying like whoa, like the whole attitude of the team had just changed, and because of Hardy Nickerson, what he brought just what he brought to the team. So you took my number 1. Well, I don't like my number 1 now because it's not my number 1.
Well, okay, Ren, who do you have at number 1 for best free agent pick in the history of the Bucs? It's okay. You can have Hardy Nickerson.
No. I'm trying to think between these last 2 guys, and I think you're going to go the other one. So I wanted to get this guy in the top 3 because I think he's vastly overrated. So as my quote unquote number 1 free agent is Brad Johnson.
Okay.
Super Bowl winning quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times have the Buccaneers tried to get a quarterback? The list is endless, and like high round picks. But when Gruden got here, he knew the guy he wanted, and went and got him, and he played really well. I mean, the whole offense was overshadowed by the defense and had been for years. But Brad Johnson's contributions as a passer and as a game manager, ball protector were vastly underrated, and were for most of his entire career. Remember when the Vikings got Randy Moss and they went 15-1 that year? Like, it was Brad Johnson who did that. Like, Randall Cunningham got hurt like week 1, week 2, and Brad Johnson's the one who took that team. And then Denny Green was a coach at the time, and he wanted to stick with Randall Cunningham, and so no Brad Johnson falls into our lap. So it's more of a, hey, remember this guy? Remember he's a free agent? Remember he won you a Super Bowl? You can argue the defense did, but every time they ran back interceptions for a touchdown was just one opportunity they took away from him from throwing a touchdown, and he did, and he threw some in the game. So he got us where we've never been and haven't been since, and where we want to get to. So as my number 1 Buck free agent, Brad Johnson.
Yeah, Brad Johnson, again, he's another guy that I have in my honorable mention, which, I mean, let's face it, I'm pretty sure my entire honorable mentions list is anyone who was a free agent signing that was on the 2002 team where we won the Super Bowl, with one notable exception. That other number 19. But yeah, I mean, Brad Johnson, he didn't make my top 3,
He didn't make mine either.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course he didn't. You just skipped ahead and talked about your honorable mention, but yeah, he didn't make my top three. Certainly valuable to the team, and I don't want to diminish that or downplay that. But again, when you talk about something that an impact that has survived beyond their years, nobody looks to Brad Johnson as an example of what a quarterback in Tampa Bay should be. Yeah, and truthfully, and to his credit, we've not had any quarterback until really Jameis Winston, and I still caution people to say that we cannot really say that until we get a couple more years past his rookie contract. Like we're still in that we're still in those early years. Yeah, he really. That I don't anticipate that. I don't want to speak that over him. I don't want to do any of that. But it could happen, and so I think we have to give Jameis that leeway to continue to develop in the early years of his career. But I still don't sit. When you sit back and you think of like who do new Buccaneers need to look in the past to find out who they need to be like, you're thinking of the Derek Brooks and the Rondé Barbers, the Warren Sapps, the
John Lynch.
Yeah, you're thinking of those guys. You're not thinking Brad Johnson. And that's why he falls out of the top three, but he is still very much in that conversation. In fact, in doing research, he was a number 2 pick for some of the people. I saw him in number 3. He was definitely usually in the top 5, top 6, somewhere around there. So I understand why you wanted to bring him out. And honestly, when you look at his contributions to the team, when you look at his numbers, very, very good. Not a very splashy player, but definitely a guy who's consistent. And when you can put a consistent player on the field who can manage the game and run the offense to be consistent and not hurt themselves, and then you put in the kind of defense that you have where the defense is also scoring points, man, that's an unstoppable team, and we proved it in 2002.
Yeah, he was a guy that never had a bad game, but he had like you said, he had a consistent game more than he had great games. He had great games, but he was more like he was more down the middle and like you said, a game manager. So I like it.
Yeah, we'll see him there. All right, well, for my number 1, I think this is no surprise, and you probably picked exactly right to go with Brad Johnson instead of talking about my number 1, and I thank you for not stealing my number 1 like I stole yours, in which case I am talking about Simeon Rice. And nothing to me says top free agent signing other than being the guy who is called the missing component to a championship team. And that's exactly the words that Monty Kiffin used when he convinced Simeon Rice to sign with the Buccaneers. He said, Simeon, I believe you are the missing component to make this a championship team. And Simeon bought into that. He came to play with the Bucs. He played the rest of his career with the Bucs for several more years. And I really, first of all, Monty Kiffin was right. He was that final piece that helped lock everything into place that just sold, it sold that entire defense for the next several years to come. And honestly, if the Glazers wouldn't have gone out, or the Glazers grew, I don't know who it was, and got rid of Sapp that very next year, got rid of John Lynch, and started selling off piece by piece by piece this championship winning team, we might have had a few more years doing well here in Tampa. And I might be just a little bitter about that whole thing, but we did keep Simeon Rice, and Simeon Rice played very, very, very well all the way up through the end of his career, even through the roller coaster years that we've come to know and love as being just what it is to be a Tampa Bay Bucs fan. But to me, you talk about the impact when you talk about, Simeon Rice is a guy that people look back and we say, what should a defensive end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers look like? Simeon Rice is going to be the guy that people point to. He is the benchmark, and we have yet to see somebody else who has become that benchmark. So for that reason, Simeon Rice becomes my number 1, and I think I'm right about that. I personally think Simeon Rice just by a hair edges out over Hardy Nickerson as far as best and top free agent signing of all time in Buccaneer history.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, and it's just opposite with me. Hardy Nickerson just edges out Simeon Rice by a hair. Um, yeah, he was something to behold. Like we were talking earlier about Calais Campbell and how like he's probably going to have one of the richest, if not the richest, free agent signing contract. Like that, he is Simeon Rice. Like you couldn't stop him. I mean,
Yeah.
there was points of the season for like 5-6 games in a row where he was averaging 2 sacks a game. You know,
Hmm.
he was something to behold, and uh, really quiet dude too. Like, you know, didn't say a lot to the reporters and didn't talk out a lot, but he was always kind of doing his own thing. I think he's like making movies now or something.
Simeon Rice.
Besides,
Yeah, yeah, he is.
yeah, that or that and tweeting angrily at how he's not in the hall,
Right.
uh, but yeah, that was it. It was either Simeon or Nickerson or Simeon, and yeah, so that's what we went with. I do have how many free agents? How many honorable mentions do you have left?
I have one more that we've not mentioned, but you go ahead. See if you can pluck my guy out of the air.
God, I hope I take him so bad. Going on your what I said earlier, how I thought about Robert Ayers and I thought about Brent Grimes, and I thought the list was going to be very short. We're going to overlap a lot, which we did. So I wanted to come up with somebody else. So I picked Brian Anger was
Good
was a free
call.
agent.
Okay.
Yeah, he saved us so many points last year by pitting the other team deep. We wouldn't have got to 9 wins without him. I've said this before on our podcast, on other podcasts, how I could make an argument that he's a defensive MVP. Obviously, he was a special teams MVP. If you want to flip the stats, like I could make an argument. I'd lose, but I could make an argument that he was the offensive MVP. He was awarded with a 5-year contract. He had a career high in pinning people inside the 20 this year. He just understands how hard to kick it and which angle to put the ball on your foot. And yeah, the kick coverage, punt coverage team, they're really humming. And if he can do that next year, I equate that to a 1.5. Like that's 1.5 wins. He's gonna get us due to his punting. So as my honorable mention, Brian Anger.
Man, that's a good pick. That is not who I had though. I had another guy that was part of that 2002 Super Bowl team, Michael Pittman, our running back. Yeah,
I thought about him.
Yeah, our running back. So he was another guy, but that and then combined with Brad Johnson, Joe J, Joe Jarvis, a handful of other people, that we've already talked about. Those guys kind of make up my honorable mentions list. And certainly there's several out there that you can go and take a look at. So, well, fans, now we'd like to know how your picks stack up against ours. You can let us know on Twitter at ThePewterCast or on Facebook.com/ThePewterCast, or shoot us an email to ThePewterCast@gmail.com. Ren, before we get out of here, why don't we, take a look at this week's poll?
Okay.
It's real bad. Okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll. Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
All right. Well, for our poll this week, just kind of coming off this whole conversation of free agents, decided to ask the question, what free agent deserves to be in the Bucs Ring of Honor one day? Now, I'm not saying this is the person that has to go up next year, because there's certainly some other people maybe that were not free agents, but people we actually drafted or traded to get. But which free agent definitely deserves to be up in the Ring of Honor, at least at some point? And kind of threw the top 3 up there. We threw Hardy Nickerson, Simeon Rice, Vincent Jackson, or we gave you the option to tweet back your own choice. And Ren, before we get to talking about who actually won, what did you think? Where would you make a case for?
Well, Hardy Nickerson. I mean, we just went over it. I'm sure that it came down to Hardy Nickerson and Simeon Rice. I'm sure Vincent Jackson got some votes maybe from like the younger newer, I should say, I shouldn't say younger because that's not necessarily true. The newer Buck fans, because maybe they're not familiar at all with Hardy Nickerson, and maybe that they weren't around during 2002 was 14 years ago. So maybe they
Good
weren't
point.
around then. So I'm sure Vincent Jackson got some votes, but I think it came down to Nickerson and Simeon Rice. So who do I think that our demographic at the Pewtercast Twitter followers
No. Who do you think it should be? Not who do you think they voted for? Who do you think it should be between the two? Who goes in first? Simeon Rice or Nickerson?
Oh, well, I could cheat and say, is this the year they do an older player, or is this the year where they do a newer player? Because they like to flip-flop it back and forth. But I would take Hardy Nickerson.
Fair enough. Well, a couple other people responded to us out there. Evan over at Bucs Football, who is one of those young guys that we just talked about, actually said really tough decision, but Jackson's contributions to the community sealed the deal for him, so he picked Vincent Jackson. Andrew said Nickerson and Rice, in my opinion, although that's two people, not one. So a little bit of a cheat there. Nick Citro said he's going to tweet his own choice, and he's going to go with all of the above. Is that cheating? Yes, Nick. That is cheating. And by the way, I beat you in our fantasy football league this last year for the championship. Vance said Simeon. Hashtag I win. Simeon Rice, Vance tweeted back at us. And Marta said Nickerson changed the culture, so he gets my vote, though Vincent Jackson is a close second. So those were a couple people who responded back with tweeting their own deal. But as far as it went, winning at 53% was Simeon Rice, saying he's the guy that should be up next. Followed, and it's actually a pretty good dispersal of that. 35% coming in second place at Hardy Nickerson. 11% said Vincent Jackson, and only 1% of our respondents said they're going to tweet back their own choice. But yeah, I don't know percentages. It sounds like that's more than 1% who tweeted me back. So, but I'm not going to figure out the percentages on that. So, well, that is our poll for this week. Well, guys, that's going to do it. Not just for the poll, but for this segment. Stay with us through this break. We'll be right back. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Right now, for you, the Pewtercast fans, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Now, this month, guys, I'm reading. Okay, well, let's be honest. I'm listening to the book Smart Money, Smart Kids by Rachel Cruz and Dave Ramsey. You know, as a father, I really want my kids to win at life. And a big part of that, as I've recently come to realize, is that means that they also need to learn how to win with money. And this book is chock full of ideas that are age-appropriate lessons that as a parent, I can actually be teaching my kids. So, and it'll work for you. Whether your kids are already teenagers, no, it's not too late to get them started on this. Or whether you're like me and you have a 4-year-old, it's not too early to get them started on this either. So I'm highly recommending Smart Money, Smart Kids by Rachel Cruz and Dave Ramsey. You can pick that up and read along with me. But of course, you can download any of Audible's 180,000 titles that you can choose from, and they'll go to your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, or your MP3 player. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/thepewtercast. Again, that's audibletrial.com/thepewtercast for your free audiobook. And we're back. This is episode 30 of the Pewtercast. And for today's discussion segment, we are going to be doing a little Buck in the News. And this is where we take a look at Bucks who are making headlines. Now, this could be anyone connected to the Bucks, not just players. But this is, people who, for whatever reason, have given us news stories here over these last couple of weeks. And we're going to give our takes really kind of on what's happening. So, Renman, I'll kind of throw it out there to you first. Was there any headlines of Buccaneers that kind of percolated to the top you wanted to talk about this week?
Well, headlines might be a bit strong. These are more just, you can call these more like fun facts from my end.
Okay.
remember last cast or last episode I talked about how I was talking to Robert Ayers, your BFF,
Yeah.
about about how he tweeted out that Batman isn't a superhero,
Uh-huh.
and he was going to catch a lot of flack for it, and we ended up going back and forth, and I turned into the person I said he was going to catch flack for. But every once in a while, it still pops up. That's like a thing that Buc fans like to interact with him, and he usually always answers, and he's really cool like that. But someone was talking about Wolverine, and if he'd seen the new Logan movie, and he said no, he hadn't seen it. So someone brought up, have you seen Deadpool? And Robert Ayers basically didn't know who he was.
Oh no.
I know. It wasn't like, who's that? He's like, no, I haven't really seen it, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, if you haven't, so you really probably aren't into superheroes too much if you haven't really seen the Deadpool movie by now, since it was such a, it was bigger than a cult hit, but it was supposed to be this little movie that Marvel put out.
Right.
And it became like this, it exploded and became this huge deal. So, I thought that was funny, just keep it on the Robert Ayers train. Gerald McCoy, who we know is a huge superhero fan, Batman's his favorite. Been waiting to get those two on Twitter together.
But Ren, Batman's not really a superhero.
That's what I've heard. Where do you stand on that? Do you stand with your BFF, or do you stand with Gerald McCoy on that?
I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't know that I'd call him a superhero. Mm-hmm. Because to me, the idea of super is that there's some aspect about them, some sort of power that transcends. Much in the same way that I don't know that I would. Well, I don't know. I mean, because could I apply that same logic to Iron Man, right? Because Iron Man and Batman, they're kind of the.
That's what a lot of people say,
right?
Like, well,
I mean,
Batman isn't, then Iron Man isn't.
Right, but Iron Man has like jet propulsion stuff and repulsor rays and that kind of stuff. But Batman he can fight really, really well in a really bulky suit, and has cool gadgets. And
the world's greatest detective.
Yeah, but Batman's pretty super. I got to tell you, he may not be super like Superman, but he's super in his own special way. So yeah, I don't know. He is a hero. I can't argue that. Is he a superhero? He's a hero who is super. Can I go with that? That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Batman is a hero who is super. And that's where I stand on that.
All right, right in the middle.
And by the way, I do believe that regardless of what this movie this last movie that came out proposed, gave us the idea of what happens if Batman and Superman get into a fight, and the answer was it's a stalemate. It's a big misunderstanding, and all you got to do is talk about their mom, and everybody's better. Spoiler alert. No, I don't think I think Batman wins in a fight against Superman almost every time.
Really?
I really do.
Well, he did in the comics, and that's what the movie was based off of, was that whole comic. But almost every time, wow.
Yeah, I think he does because it just I think he is smarter than Superman, and I think he can figure out how to, he's going to know the kryptonite thing. He's going to be able to figure that kind of stuff out. I think he's going to be smart and figure out the weaknesses and how to exploit them, and Superman is just going to use his powers. So,
wow, that sounds super heroic of Batman.
It's heroically super.
Well, anyway, getting back to what we got on with this tangent, Gerald McCoy, in case anyone wants to know how Gerald McCoy felt about the movie Logan, out on Twitter. He loved it. He thought it was the best Wolverine movie out there. I will say to anybody who hasn't seen it, and to you too, Brent, if you're planning on seeing it, do not take the kids. But I've heard many, many times
it is an R-rated movie.
It is an R-rated movie, mm-hmm. and it's not R-rated Deadpool language R-rated. It's like gory, hacker slasher, very violent superhero Wolverine movie.
So it's a good feel good date movie, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bring your mom to it on Mother's Day. she'll love you for it.
There you go.
And this is the last little tidbit I saw that was going on back out there. Like I said, not news, more like fun facts. Mike Evans went to back to Texas A&M and hung out and watched them a couple of spring practices. So that's going on.
Well, hopefully he gives them the "Are we dogs?" kind of speech, that Jameis gave the FSU boys. So, yeah, that's fun. There were just two that I really kind of had that I want to talk about. The first one, we've already actually mentioned it a little bit throughout the show, is Vincent Jackson being a guy who doesn't want to retire and he wants to keep playing. And I think my big thoughts on that are just, good for him. If he feels like he's got more gas left in the tank, he doesn't want to go out on a bad note. Good for him. I hope somebody picks him up.
Yeah. What can you say? Like you said, we've talked about that. Go out your own ways. If you can, he's earned it. That's for sure. If you can end your career on the way you want to, go for it. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna echo the sentiment I said earlier. Nothing but the best. Thank you very much. Obviously he's going to land on his feet. I still want him to see him come back as some type of front office or community role with the Buccaneers.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
That's I was saying that for a little while. It's like, it was like, I don't see him back, but I can see him back as, a non-player. Mm-hmm. And that's what I kind of thought the first time I listened to the interviews that Jason were alluding to, and I'm like, okay, cool, that's great. Mm-hmm. And then you listen to him a couple more times, and it's like, it's not quite it. And then like a couple days later, it comes out he wants to play. So, good luck to you, and thank you very much. You will always be a Buc with me too.
Yeah, and here's the thing: he could go play another year or two somewhere else, and then still come back and work for the Bucs. Because they've talked about how Tampa is their forever home for his family, and he's got obviously all his charity work that's happening there in Tampa, and that sort of, and the Bucs do employ former players. So and Shelton Quarles right now, director of player personnel, I think is what it is, or something like that. Basically, he's like head of the scouting department.
Anthony Beck does stuff with him. David Moore's on the radio.
Yeah. These guys all do stuff. People are around all the time. So that's certainly not out of the realm. I'll tell you. And on that note, though, who I'm kind of excited to see. He sat out this last year, but Peyton Manning. He had talked about often that when he's done playing, he wants to come back as a coach, and ostensibly he's taking a year or two or a few off. But I'll be real interested to see what happens with Peyton as his retirement years go on further. To see if he comes back, and Vincent Jackson, I think, could be a great person to also come back. Speaking of players who've returned as coaches, Hardy Nickerson was back as a coach for a couple of years. I think under Lovey. I think he's with Lovey right now, actually.
He's with Lovey in Illinois.
Yeah. So it's can't speak much to that, but I do love the fact that he is still working and getting stuff done. So that's Vincent Jackson. But I think the big one that I wanted to talk about, and admittedly, the news on this, the hype on this has really seemed to have died down. But it's happened just within the last week and a half since we last recorded, Ren. So it's relatively recent. But we're talking about Jameis Winston. And unless you've been living under a rock, you're probably familiar with the story that, about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, Jameis Winston was at an elementary school there in Tampa, and he was speaking to a group of students, and he was kind of doing his thing and kind of leading into these kids. He was trying to build them up. And according to Jameis, he had noticed that one of the students was kind of starting to drift. And so rather than call that one student out, he told all the boys to stand up and, kind of said something to the effect of like, men are really strong and we're always going to be strong, and girls, they should be silent. And that struck a chord, ostensibly so, with some people. And it was picked up by some local media and eventually by national media. And even Jameis has come out and said, oh yeah, I didn't actually even mean that. That was a poor choice of words and not at all what he meant. It was not at all what he meant. And like I said, it was picked up by tons of major news outlets. I saw it all over Twitter. People, judging and criticizing Jameis for saying that women should be silent. And that little girl who turned to her counselor and said, "But I'm strong." So certainly what he said had an effect. But the first person to really report on this was our own Tampa Bay Times reporter, Tom Jones. And here's the problem I have with this, and it's the big issue, and it's not what Jameis said. Now, I'm going to kind of do a little side note here. If Jameis had said what he said and he meant it exactly as it sounded, then yes, I would have a big problem with that. I happen to be very proud of the fact, and I'm very lucky to be the husband of a very successful, prominent woman in the community that we live in. And I also have a daughter. I have a little girl. So I am very pro, hey, women can do just about anything. And I want my daughter to grow up strong. I want her knowing that she has a lot to contribute to this world, that her thoughts and opinions matter, and that her voice matters. And I take issue with people who try to deter that and people who would try to silence her. But I don't think that's what Jameis was trying to say. And he has said that that's not what he was trying to say. That's not my big problem here. My big problem is that Tom Jones, kind of one of our own people, went all like TMZ on this thing and wrote this big article with a headline and had it worded in such a way that honestly kind of slandered Jameis. It took it out of context and kind of barely put the context in as you got down towards the bottom. And he wasn't just reporting the news. He was actually attacking Jameis and put in, what they call the boilerplate, which is oh yeah, by the way, Jameis had these other issues that, were never really proven true, but, they were there. Just as kind of a thing to keep bringing that up. And here's the thing. I find that so despicable. I really do. I generally have a problem with media when they do stuff like that to anyone. But I'm kind of taking this one a little personal because it's my quarterback. So yeah, that's just really what I want to talk about just for a little bit here. Man, do you have any thoughts on this whole Jameis Winston issue or even just the way the news article is written? Anything like that, Ren?
Well, yeah. I actually wrote a little bit about it in the mailbag. We just, for very briefly at the opening there, we were teasing about that. If you don't know, I write for Real Bucs Talk blogspot.com. We were teasing about our Twitter handle, like, oh, you can follow them too. But we do a good
Which
job.
You should. That's not a joke. You should. Everybody, go follow them.
Yes, you should. You should follow us. I'll probably give that out later. But I have a weekly mailbag that I do, and obviously, the mailbag came up a few days after that incident happened, and I got a bunch of questions about, what do I think about Jameis's content. Now, if you want to go there and read it, go ahead, because I don't want to get long-winded, and I don't want to take too much away from Brent. But there are a couple things. One, I would rather my media be overzealous than lazy. I absolutely think that angle of the story, like you said, the boilerplate of past things with Jameis and what he said needed to be discussed. I do, like you do, Brent, take offense to the tone and the angle of the way the story went. It started out like, oh, Jameis was spending his Wednesday with, kids and doing a message. And then the rest of the article was just like, it just slammed him. And it should have been the other way around. It should have been Jameis, went out there and talked to kids and he misspoke here. And this is why it should be, might be a red flag, or send up, have your feelers, your antenna vibrate a bit. But this is what I know of Jameis. This is what I've been around Jameis, and the rest of it should be about what he's done in the community and how he is as a person. So I had issue, like you said, TMZing it and taking full throttle. And Tom Jones, for our, he took a beating for it on Twitter, and I do commend him because he spent a whole day, talking about his article and talking about his angle, and he backs every word, and that's fine, as long as you didn't do it if you didn't have an agenda for it, then freedom of the press. Like you, I didn't like it. I didn't like the tone. I didn't like the angle. But I felt that it had to be said. So basically, when I wrote in that mailbag, at the end of it, there's actually a clip that Mark Ramirez found. He's a writer of Real Bucs Talk. He found this clip of Jameis when he went back to his high school, and he's talking to a bunch of kids, a bunch of teenagers. You can't really tell. I mean, he says kids a lot, but you can't really tell how old they are. And basically what they're doing is they're dedicating his high school field to him. This is after he won the trophy at Florida State. And I attached it and embedded it into the article, and it's great. And this happened before he was a Buccaneer. But to sum up these last few lines, I'll just read from what I wrote. I believe that the rest of his days as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, he will strive to make his team and his city better than he found it. Finally, I believe this is more than any of us can ask of him. Jameis gets up every day and tries to better himself, but more importantly, he tries to better the people around him. He believes that leading is you do that through sacrifice. You sacrifice your time and you sacrifice your effort to lift up the people around him, and that's just what he was doing there at that middle school. So, this is something that you can drone on and on about. It's a very hot button issue, and was for a while, like you said, picked up national media. But so I'm just going to wrap it up and tell you those are my feelings on it, and I'll just go ahead and let you talk.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that, and maybe flipping it on its head and starting there. I'm not even, I don't even think that we should fully and completely or have to dismiss the past allegations, because those are a part of history. To continue to bring that up all the time, though, or to use that as a, hey, look, he's got this past and here it is kind of coming to light in this situation is I am one of those people that beat up on Tom Jones, and I'm probably going to continue to, because I just think it was I think it was lowbrow reporting. I really do. The way he did it, and if he wants to stand by it, that's fine. He's a writer for Tampa Bay Times. I'm not. But aside from all of that, let's talk about Jameis. In just the incident. And I think this is actually this is a great leadership lesson that we can pull from this. Now, listen, Jameis is young. All right. He is a public figure, though, which means that everything he says is going to be scrutinized for as long as he plays in the NFL, and most likely beyond. Jameis is also not a professional speech giver person. And so mistakes and flubs and misspoken words are going to happen. It happens on this show all the time. I know, because I go back and listen to the show a couple days after we post it, and I realize all the places that I messed up. Mistakes are going to happen. But if I was Jameis's dad, or if I was his coach, my advice to him, and this is really for a guy who prides himself on leadership, my advice to him would be this: to admit the mistake, which, by the way, he's already done, but then to take the next step. And if he chooses to do this, awesome. If he doesn't, not a big deal. Because honestly, here we are, maybe 10 days after the whole thing happened, and we're talking about it, but I think most people have probably forgotten about it at this point, or at least have moved on from it. But I would take a step beyond, except for maybe those girls specifically. They might not have fully moved on from it. I would take the next step, and if I was Jameis, I would see about returning to that school and calling those girls back together. Maybe even the boys too, I'm not sure. But it's at least calling those girls together, and Jameis in front of those girls, which are the girls that he would have impacted, so to speak, that he would have, I don't know if offended is the right word, but those were the people that were within the hearing. Those are the people who received the message, or might have been misspoken about. And Jameis just... there, he needs to apologize for them, admit that, hey, listen, when I said this, that's not what I meant, and I misspoke, and I apologize for that. In fact, I would say he should apologize first and then say, I misspoke when that happened. And then give his message to the girls specifically for saying how strong girls should be and for building up the girls. And beyond that, to me, it's done and it's over. But that would be, I think I think it would be the right thing to do. Is to go, because though, to be able to go in front of those girls and to say, hey, I messed up. I screwed up in front of you and I'm sorry. And that's not what I meant. Let me take an opportunity to go back and correct myself. And that would be leadership at its finest. It would be more than just brushing an incident off, to the side and go, oh, that's not what I meant, and then moving forward. Because from the sounds of it, from what you hear, people didn't really, with the exception of the one little girl who turned around and said, but I am strong, people for the most part seem to feel that it was a very positive message and that the experience overall was very good. And it's sad that this is kind of detracting from that. But that would be the only, as far as that goes, that's done. I'm sorry. As far as what should happen next, I think that's really it. And then I think it's done. And I think it's over. And that then, to me, is a story I'd like to see Tom Jones write about. And Mark Cook and Scott Reynolds and you guys and the people over at What the Buck and, all these other places. I'd love to see the second half of that, because mistakes happen. Flubs happen. Misspoken words are going to happen. And I would love to see that. So if he doesn't do it, I don't think any less of him. I'm he's certainly not listening to me. He's not even hearing these words. So, but that would be what I would suggest to Jameis. And I'd love to see something like that happen with Jameis. So that's kind of my, diatribe, I guess, on the whole Jameis Winston incident from this last week.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, and it's something that I think that we needed to address, and we need, you and I, and also the Pewtercast as a whole. These things need to be talked about. It doesn't matter which side you fall on the issue, but they definitely have to be discussed. And like I said before, if they're not, you're just being lazy, and almost you're kind of being a chicken too. And you grow by doing things you don't want to. So yeah, I'm glad that I feel lucky that I have a forum to talk about it, and I'm glad we did, and I'm glad we discussed it.
Yeah, and as far as the boilerplate stuff that keeps getting attached to Jameis, there's a couple of things. There's the crab legs incident, which come on, that's just comical at this point. And I for one completely buy the idea that somebody looked at him, an employee there, and said, "Here, just take these," and Jameis walked out. And probably that particular employee did not actually have the authority to tell him that he could do that. I personally would buy that story. That seems very likely to me. The whole thing about the language incident in the cafeteria, lapse in judgment. The kid was 18, 19 years old. I mean, my God, he's just a young little college kid. Shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have done it at all, but he learned his lesson. And you can actually read about that in another Scott Reynolds Fab 5 from, I believe it was over the summer, where Scott Reynolds got a chance to talk to Jameis's dad and kind of unveiled that. It's the only time that Pewter Report has ever made me cry, was reading that story and the effect that had on Jameis and how it helped mature him. And then of course the accusations, the horrible accusations of I guess sexual misconduct. I don't know what all exactly how to say it, but we'll just say that in the investigation that ensued, Jameis was cleared of everything from the university, and no charges were ever filed. They reached an agreement, and that's all gone away. So those kinds of things, to me, those issues are done, and they're not issues that I think need to keep coming back up. And for those reasons, it just, that'd be like me talking about when I was, some of the antics that I pulled when I was a kid, but I'm well beyond those years now, and if somebody falsely accused me of something, if somebody falsely accuses me of something, I don't need to keep having that thrown back in my face, if that makes sense. And And granted, none of us were there. We don't really know what happened, but as far as the investigations are concerned, that is what has come out of them. So, all of that said, I'd love to, we'd love to see Jameis come back and, have something that's a lot more positive, leaving those girls with a little bit more positive message for what they have there. So, any other thoughts, Ren? Any other buck in the news you want to talk about?
No, I think that's it. I think that's a good place to end it.
A good down note to end the show on, right? Yeah. So,
wah, wah, wah.
Well, guys, that's going to wrap up not only this segment. Yeah,
terrible.
That's horrible. Why do they do that? It's going to wrap up this segment and this episode as well. Ren, why don't you remind us, as you just did a few minutes ago, where everybody can get a hold of you out there on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at RenDaxt. That's REN_DAXT. Follow me, I'll follow you back. But I write for at Real Bucs Talk. That's also you can find on Twitter at Real Bucs Talk, REALBUCSTALK. And our website, which will be coming very shortly, we're actually moving to a .com, so there's some big things happening for us there. Yeah, I know. It's gonna be. I'm very pleased the way that things are moving for us there at Real Bucs Talk. Some big changes are coming, and we're gonna make a push to get in there and be known as the third Bucs outlet as far as place to go for Bucs information. So that's coming out. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Like I said, at RenDaxt on Twitter, _DAXT. Follow me. I'm so articulate on Twitter, I swear to God. Those are some things we do. We're always talking Bucs. Right now, we'll have some stuff going up about the combine and of course the draft, who we like in free agent, and who we like in the draft. So that's where you can find us.
Yeah, well, guys, you can find me personally at Brent Allen Live on Twitter or on Facebook.com/Brent Allen Live. And just as a final reminder, you can get in touch with the show and anything that we have talked about today at Facebook.com/ThePewterCast or on Twitter at ThePewterCast. Or if you're a little more winded than just the 140 characters, give us an email to ThePewterCast@gmail.com. Be like Javier. Javier was cool, and we just might read your email here on the next show. Well, guys, there are times in life when we all unintentionally mess up. And sometimes the mess up is rather inconsequential and no one's really affected. But often that's not the case. Our mistake, while unintentional and meaning no harm, does actually cause insult or actually possibly harm someone, whether it's a stranger, a friend, or maybe even a fan. Oftentimes we don't even realize it when we've done it. But when it's brought to our attention and we see what it has done, a lot of times our first response is to say, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way," and begin to defend ourselves. And then sometime later we apologized. But what if we flip that on its head? What if we apologized first, and then, if given the chance, you can try to explain why it was not what you meant? Don't forget, guys, the hurt has already been inflicted. And even if you didn't mean for it to happen, so start with the apology first. I think you'll find it saves a lot more relationships than doing it the other way around. Well, until next time, Bucs fans, this is Brent Allen signing off along with my co-host, RenDaxt. Go Bucs.